Hey, what is up, everyone? Today we got a pretty unique story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. Get cozy and watch till the end, guys.
In the darkness between stars, where the light of the Astronomicon barely reaches and the void presses against the hulls of Imperial vessels, there exists a force that has never known rest. For more than 10,000 years, since the ashes of the Horus heresy still smoldered across a broken galaxy, they have waged war without pause. They are the Black Templars, and their crusade will end only when the last enemy of humanity draws their final breath. That day, they believe, will never come. This is not a chapter that fortifies worlds or holds territory. This is not a force that waits for orders from distant terror or petitions from the High Lords. The Black Templars are perpetual motion incarnate, a storm of ceramite and faith that sweeps across the galaxy, leaving only ashes and redemption in its wake. Where other Space Marine chapters measure their service in campaigns and centuries, the Black Templars measure theirs in a single, unbroken chain of warfare that stretches back to the very founding of their order. To understand the Black Templars is to understand what happens when faith becomes an unquenchable fire, when duty transforms into an eternal vow, and when the Emperor's command to conquer the stars becomes not a metaphor, but a literal, binding oath that can never be fulfilled or abandoned. They are crusaders in the truest sense, holy warriors for whom peace is not merely improbable, but fundamentally impossible. They were born in the aftermath of the Imperium's greatest civil war, forged from the most zealous warriors of a shattered legion, and from that moment forward, they have never stopped fighting. But the birth of eternal war, when the Horus heresy ended and the Emperor ascended to his golden throne, the Imperium found itself facing a reckoning. The Space Marine legions, those mighty forces that had conquered the galaxy, had proven too powerful to be controlled. Half of them had turned traitor, and their power had nearly destroyed everything humanity had built. Rabut Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, understood that such concentrated military might could never be allowed to exist again. His solution was the Codex Astartes, a comprehensive reorganization that would break the legions into smaller chapters of roughly 1,000 Space Marines each. For some Primarchs, this was an acceptable compromise. They understood the wisdom of preventing any single commander from wielding the power to threaten the Imperium itself. Yet for others, particularly Rogel Dawn of the Imperial Fists, it was an insult and a betrayal. Dawn had stood loyal when brothers like Horus and Fulgrim had turned. He had commanded the defense of Terra itself, had seen the Emperor's palace besieged by traitors, had witnessed his father struck down by the arch-traitor, and now, in the aftermath of that loyalty and sacrifice, he was being told that his legion must be dismantled because others could not be trusted. The tension between Dawn and Guilliman grew until it threatened to plunge the Imperium into another civil war. The Imperial Navy, following the orders of the new government, even fired upon Imperial Fists vessels. Brothers who had fought side by side against the traitors now found themselves on opposite sides of a political divide that could tear the Imperium apart. It was only when Dawn realized that his stubbornness might cause the very destruction he had fought to prevent that he finally relented. The Imperial Fists would be divided, their warriors scattered among successor chapters. But compliance, for Rogel Dawn, did not mean acceptance. And among his warriors, there was one who embodied the Imperial Fist's most aggressive and uncompromising nature. His name was Sigismund, and he would become the founder and first High Marshal of the Black Templars. Sigismund had been born in the drift camps on the Ionis Plateau of Terra, one of countless children who lived in the brutal conditions of humanity's homeworld before the coming of the Emperor. He had been recruited into the Imperial Fists Legion during the Great Crusade, and his talents with a blade had quickly become legendary. And other warriors spoke of him with a mixture of awe and unease, for there was something cold and absolute in the way Sigismund fought. He did not merely defeat his opponents, he executed them with a precision that suggested death itself had taken human form. The Primarch Sanguinius of the Blood Angels once remarked that Sigismund seemed less like Rogal Dorn's champion and more like Death's own servant. It was not meant as criticism, but as observation, a recognition that Sigismund possessed a quality that transcended mere skill. When he fought, it was with the certainty of inevitability, as though the outcome had already been determined, and he was simply carrying out a sentence that had been passed long before the battle began. During the Great Crusade, Sigismund served as first captain of the Imperial Fists and leading the elite Templar Brethren of the First Company. He became known for his absolute devotion to duty and his unwavering certainty about the future of the Imperium. While others spoke optimistically of the day when the Great Crusade would end and humanity would know peace, Sigismund held a darker view. In conversations with brother captains from other legions, he expressed his belief that the Great Crusade would never truly end. Humanity would fight to secure the Imperium, he said, and then spend the rest of eternity fighting to keep it intact. In the far future, there would be only war. His words proved prophetic in ways that even he might not have imagined. When Horus's treachery was revealed and the heresy began, Sigismund found himself thrust into a role that would define the rest of his long life. While as the traitor forces closed in on Terra, Rogal Dorn chose Sigismund to serve as the first Emperor's champion. This was not merely an honorary title, but a sacred duty. Sigismund would be given the finest armor and weapons the Imperial Fists possessed, and he would go forth to challenge the champions of chaos in single combat. His purpose was to stand as the Emperor's personal representative in battle, to embody his will and fury against those who had betrayed everything they had once sworn to protect. Sigismund accepted this role with the same cold certainty that characterized everything he did. During the Siege of Terra, he became a figure of legend, cutting down traitor champions and inspiring the defenders with his unshakable presence. His armor was painted black, like the chaplains of the Reclusium, for he too served the Emperor directly. He bound his weapons to his wrists with chains, a custom he had learned from his friend Khan of the World Eaters before that legion's fall to chaos. The chains ensured that even in death, his weapons would not fall from his grasp. They were a symbol of absolute commitment, of refusing to surrender even unto the end. The Siege of Terra ended with the Emperor victorious, but mortally wounded, interred forever within the Golden Throne. Horus was dead, but the cost of that victory could never be calculated. The Imperium had survived, but it had been changed irrevocably, and Sigismund, the Emperor's champion, found himself facing a galaxy still full of enemies and a new order that seemed to ignore the very lessons the heresy should have taught. The oath that would never end. When Rabut Gilliman ordered the second founding and the breaking of the legions into chapters, Sigismund gathered those Imperial Fists who shared his temperament. These were the most aggressive warriors of the 7th Legion, those who favored assault over defense, those whose faith in the Emperor had evolved into something approaching religious fervor. They were, in many ways, the warriors least suited to the careful, measured approach advocated by the Codex Astartes. They were crusaders at heart, and they would become the Black Templars. Sigismund's ascension to the rank of High Marshal came with a declaration that would echo through the millennia. He swore an oath that he and his chapter would prove their loyalty to the Emperor by never resting in their duties against his enemies. This was not hyperbole or metaphor. Sigismund meant it literally. The Black Templars would not establish a homeworld. They would not build static fortress monasteries or settle into garrison duty. Instead, they would take to the stars in a massive fleet and wage eternal war against everything that threatened humanity. Every succeeding High Marshal of the Black Templars has renewed this oath. For more than 10,000 years, the Black Templars have maintained their crusade without pause. It is, by any measure, the longest Space Marine crusade in the history of the Imperium. Other chapters launch crusades that last years, decades, sometimes even centuries. The Black Templars' crusade has lasted longer than most civilizations. It has outlived countless generations of humans. It has continued through periods of peace and war, through times when the Imperium expanded and times when it contracted. The oath endures because it must, because it is the foundation of everything the Black Templars are. This commitment to eternal crusading shaped the chapter in fundamental ways. Rather than constructing a single fortress monastery like other chapters, the Black Templars established chapter keeps on worlds they conquered or liberated. These keeps serve multiple purposes. They act as staging grounds for future crusades, allowing the chapter to deploy forces from numerous locations across the galaxy. They serve as recruitment centers, drawing aspirants from the populations of these worlds. And they stand as reminders of the Black Templars' presence, fortified positions that can be called upon when needed, but are not the chapter's true home. What the Black Templars' true home is their fleet. Their ships are not merely transport vessels, but mobile fortresses, cathedral-like structures that house entire armies and contain the chapter's most sacred relics. The flagship of the fleet is the Eternal Crusader, a Gloriana-class battleship that serves as the spiritual center of the entire chapter. It is aboard this vessel that the High Marshal maintains his command, and it is here that the chapter's most important councils are held. The Eternal Crusader has fought in countless battles across 10 millennia, and its very existence is a testament to the Black Templars' endurance. The decision to forsake a homeworld was both practical and symbolic. Practically, it allowed the Black Templars to maintain their mobility and respond to threats across the galaxy without being tied to the defense of a single world. Symbolically, it reinforced their identity as Eternal Crusaders. They would not settle, they would not rest. They would move from war to war, from system to system, bringing the Emperor's judgment to every corner of the galaxy. Their home was the crusade itself, and that crusade would end only with the final victory over darkness. But there was another aspect to the Black Templars' character that set them apart from most other Space Marine chapters. While most Astartes maintained the secular view of the Emperor that had prevailed during the Great Crusade, viewing him as humanity's greatest leader and their genetic father, but not as a deity, the Black Templars embraced the imperial cult. While they worshipped the Emperor as a god with a fervor that matched or exceeded even the most devoted human believers. This religious devotion was unusual among Space Marines. The Emperor himself had promoted a secular vision during the Great Crusade, had condemned religious faith as superstition and ignorance. But during the Siege of Terra, a religious movement had emerged among the defenders, and Sigismund had been at its heart. To the common soldiers and citizens who witnessed his deeds, he appeared not merely as a warrior, but as a living saint, the Emperor's chosen champion striking down the forces of darkness. That veneration had affected Sigismund, had shown him the power that faith could wield. The Black Templars carried this religious conviction forward. They saw the Emperor not as a powerful man, but as the God-Emperor of mankind, and the Divine Master, whose will they served absolutely. This made them natural allies of the ecclesiarchy, the church of the imperial cult, and it informed every aspect of their warfare. They did not fight merely to secure territory or eliminate threats. They fought a holy war, a righteous crusade to purge heresy and bring the light of faith to the darkened corners of the galaxy. Every battle was an act of worship, every enemy slain an offering to the God Emperor. This zealotry disturbed some of their fellow Space Marines. The Imperial Fists, their parent chapter, maintained a more measured and traditional approach to the Emperor's worship. Other chapters found the Black Templars' fanaticism excessive and potentially dangerous. But the Black Templars cared nothing for such concerns. They answered to the Emperor alone, and if others found their devotion unsettling, that was the problem of those weaker souls who could not match their faith. The death of the first High Marshal, Sigismund, led the Black Templars for centuries after their founding, and during that time, he remained convinced of one truth that others dismissed as paranoia. The traitor legions had not been destroyed, he insisted. They had fled into the Eye of Terror, that vast wound in reality where the material universe met the warp, and they would return. The High Lords of Terror, and many Imperial commanders believed that the traitors had been scattered beyond any hope of recovery, that they would spend eternity fighting among themselves in the depths of the Eye. Sigismund knew better. He brought a significant Black Templars fleet to the Cadian Gate, iced the main stable route into and out of the Eye of Terror, and maintained a vigil there. His ships patrolled the surrounding systems, watching for any sign of traitor activity. He even sent reconnaissance vessels into the Eye itself, despite the enormous dangers of such missions. One of these ships crashed on the Black Legion-held world of Millennium, setting in motion a chain of events that would prove Sigismund's suspicions correct. When Ezekiel Abaddon, now calling himself the Despoiler and claiming the title of War Master, led the Black Legion out of the Eye of Terror in what would become known as the First Black Crusade, Sigismund and his Black Templars were waiting. The forces of chaos had expected surprise, but instead they found a prepared enemy led by one of the few warriors who had never stopped hunting them. What the First Battle of Cadia was a brutal engagement that saw massive casualties on both sides. Abaddon's forces were vast, composed of the remnants of the traitor legions and warbands of Chaos Space Marines that had been accumulating power in the Eye for centuries. The Black Templars fought with the fury of vindication, their High Marshal's prophecy proven true in the most terrible way possible. Ship-to-ship combat raged across the system, while boarding actions determined the fate of capital vessels on both sides. Abaddon himself led a boarding party onto the Eternal Crusader, determined to kill Sigismund and claim the Black Templars' flagship as a prize. The fighting aboard the ancient battleship was savage, with Black Legion warriors pushing deep into the vessel only to be met by Sigismund's sword brethren and the elite veterans of the chapter. Scores of traitors fell before they even reached the High Marshal's position, cut down by warriors who had trained for centuries to defend their leader and their ship. When Abaddon finally reached Sigismund, the two ancient warriors faced each other in a moment that bridged the millennia. They had known each other during the heresy, had even shared a certain respect despite fighting on opposite sides. Abaddon was the new War Master of Chaos, wearing the Talon of Horus, the lightning claw that had killed the Emperor's beloved son, Sanguinius. Sigismund was the Emperor's champion, bearing the black sword that had struck down countless champions of darkness. Sigismund spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 years. He told Abaddon that he had hunted him since the fires of terror had cooled, as that lesser warriors had always stood in his way, and that he had killed them all. He said that he had never stopped searching, not through all the long years. The obsession in his voice was evident, the single-minded focus of a warrior who had devoted his entire existence to this one purpose. Abaddon responded with an offer. He recognized Sigismund's skill and determination, and he suggested that if the High Marshal could understand what he, Abaddon, had learned in the Eye of Terror, then Sigismund might survive their encounter. It was, in its own way, an expression of respect, an acknowledgement that Sigismund was worthy of something better than death. Sigismund's response was to draw his black sword and signal his readiness for battle. He would never turn from the Emperor's light, would never accept the lies of chaos. But the duel that followed was fierce beyond description. Both warriors were among the greatest fighters the galaxy had ever produced. Both wielded weapons of terrible power. Both fought with the accumulated skill of lifetimes spent in warfare. At one point, Sigismund drove the black sword deep into Abaddon's chest, piercing even the blessed armor of the War Master. It was a mortal wound, or would have been for a lesser being. But Abaddon wore Terminator armor and bore the blessings of the dark gods, and though he staggered and nearly fell, he remained standing. In that moment of Sigismund's committed attack, Abaddon struck back with the Talon of Horus, the lightning claw that had killed a Primarch. The blow was devastating. Abaddon's weapon tore through Sigismund's armor and into his body, disemboweling the High Marshal and separating his upper body from his lower. Even for a space marine, enhanced beyond human limits and capable of surviving wounds that would kill ordinary men, this was fatal. Sigismund fell, the black sword finally slipping from his grasp. With his last breath, Sigismund looked up at Abaddon and spoke final words that the despoiler would remember for the next 10,000 years. "You will die," Sigismund said, "as your weak father did, soulless, honorless, weeping, ashamed." Then the first High Marshal of the Black Templars, the first Emperor's champion, the warrior who had sworn an oath to never rest in his duty, finally found peace. He was over 1,000 years old, kept alive by hate and duty, and the stubborn refusal to die before his work was complete. His death was not a failure, but a fulfillment. He had hunted the traitors across the centuries, and when they returned, he had been there to face them. Abaddon survived the duel, though the wound Sigismund inflicted left a scar that would remain with him forever. He kept it as a mark of respect, a reminder that even in victory, the High Marshal had left his mark. Sigismund's body was respectfully placed aboard a captured Black Templars ship, the Valorous Vow, along with his black sword. Before sending the vessel back to Terra as a declaration of war, Abaddon had a sorcerer carve 3 words into the blade: "We are returned." The message was received. The first Black Crusade would devastate the worlds around the Eye of Terror before finally being driven back. Abaddon would return 12 more times over the following millennia, each Black Crusade growing in power and destruction. But he would never forget the old warrior who had nearly killed him, and the Black Templars would never forget their founder who had given his life defending humanity from the very enemies he had always known would return. A chapter unlike any other. In the aftermath of Sigismund's death, the Black Templars did not diminish or falter. If anything, his sacrifice reinforced the oath he had sworn and made it even more sacred. Every High Marshal who followed him renewed the vow of eternal crusading, and the chapter's unusual organization became more entrenched with each passing century. The Black Templars defied the Codex Astartes in almost every particular, where Guilliman's organizational doctrine called for chapters to be divided into 10 companies of 100 Space Marines each. As the Black Templars organized themselves into crusade fleets of varying sizes. Under most circumstances, the chapter maintains 3 major crusade fleets, though during particularly tumultuous periods, this number has increased substantially. Each crusade fleet is a completely self-contained force, capable of operating independently for years or even decades at a time. This organizational flexibility is both a strength and a source of concern for some imperial authorities. The Black Templars are not bound by the 1,000-warrior limit that most chapters observe. Their numbers are difficult to determine precisely because they are always spread across multiple crusades, operating in different parts of the galaxy. Some estimates suggest that the chapter's total strength may be several thousand Space Marines, far exceeding the standard chapter size. The Black Templars neither confirm nor deny such estimates, and the distributed nature of their forces makes it nearly impossible for anyone to conduct an accurate census. The Inquisition has, at various points in history, kept a close watch on the Black Templars because of this. A Space Marine chapter that exceeds the prescribed limits could potentially pose a threat to Imperial stability, particularly one that does not answer to conventional chains of command. However, the Black Templars' absolute loyalty to the Emperor and their constant prosecution of his enemies has made it difficult to justify any action against them. They are too useful, too effective, and too visible in their devotion to be labeled as a threat. Or even if they do bend or break the organizational rules that other chapters follow. At the head of the chapter stands the High Marshal, equivalent to a chapter master in other organizations, but bearing a title that speaks to the Black Templars' crusading nature. The High Marshal monitors the progress of all active crusades and coordinates the chapter's overall strategy, though the vast distances of the galaxy and the independence of each crusade mean that his control is often more spiritual than tactical. He commands from the Eternal Crusader, maintaining the sacred traditions and serving as the living embodiment of Sigismund's oath. Each individual crusade is led by a marshal, a warrior chosen from the Sword Brethren through ritual combat and confirmed by the High Marshal himself. Only once in the chapter's history has the High Marshal withheld approval for a selected marshal during the mysterious Gervart repeal of the 36th Millennium, the details of which remain sealed in the chapter's archives. Marshals are fanatical and experienced warriors who lead from the front lines, embodying the aggressive, personal style of warfare that defines the Black Templars. Below the marshals are castellans, who serve as battlefield commanders equivalent to lieutenants in other chapters. Castellans lead the fighting companies within a crusade, tactical formations analogous to standard codex companies. The position of castellan is often temporary and situational, with marshals selecting different warriors for the role depending on the demands of the current campaign. A castellan might lead a company for years during a protracted siege, or he might be designated for a single battle and then return to his normal position afterward. This flexibility allows the Black Templars to adapt their command structure to whatever situation they face. The Sword Brethren represent the elite of the chapter, warriors who have proven themselves through exceptional deeds and have been inducted into the Marshal's household. They are equivalent to the veteran companies of other chapters, though they do not organize themselves into formal units. Sword Brethren fight where they are needed, often serving as the Marshal's personal guard or leading critical assaults. They are also the only Black Templars who regularly use tactical dreadnought armor, the massive Terminator suits that turn a Space Marine into a walking tank. When Sword Brethren don Terminator armor, they typically select melee weapons to complement it, further emphasizing the chapter's preference for close combat. At the core of the Black Templars' fighting strength are the Crusader squads, formations unique to the chapter that mix experienced initiates with raw neophytes. In other chapters, recruits are kept separate from battle brothers, organized into scout companies where they can be trained and evaluated before being granted power armor and full status as Space Marines. The Black Templars reject this approach. Their neophytes are assigned directly to Crusader squads, where they fight alongside initiates, learning through example and combat experience rather than formal instruction. This system has several advantages. It ensures that neophytes are immediately immersed in the chapter's culture and traditions, learning not just the mechanics of warfare, but the spiritual conviction that drives the Black Templars. It also means that every Crusader squad contains warriors of varying skill levels, creating a natural mentorship structure where initiates must not only fight effectively themselves, but also guide their neophytes through their first battles. The system is harsh, and many neophytes do not survive long enough to become initiates, but those who do have been forged in the furnace of actual warfare rather than mere training. Crusader squads form and reform on an ad hoc basis, with warriors fighting together out of familiarity and comradeship rather than any imposed organization. A squad might remain together for decades if its members form strong bonds, or it might dissolve and recombine after a single campaign, depending on losses and reassignments. This informal structure might seem chaotic to chapters that follow the Codex Astartes strictly, but for the Black Templars, it works precisely because it reflects their values. They are crusaders, fighting alongside brothers they trust, not cogs in a carefully designed military machine. Specialists such as chaplains, apothecaries, and tech marines are organized centrally and dispatched to various crusades as needed. This ensures that every crusade has access to the medical, technical, and spiritual support necessary to maintain its fighting capability over extended campaigns. Chaplains play a particularly important role in the Black Templars, serving not just as spiritual guides, but as keepers of the chapter's traditions and enforcers of its faith. Their sermons and litanies are integral to the Black Templars' combat effectiveness, whipping their brothers into states of religious fervor before battle. The living miracle of the Emperor's champion. Among all the traditions that define the Black Templars, none is more sacred or mysterious than that of the Emperor's champion. On the eve of battle, as the warriors of a crusade kneel before their chaplains in prayer and meditation, something extraordinary sometimes occurs. One among them receives a vision, a divine communication from the Emperor himself that marks him as chosen for a sacred duty. The content of these visions varies, but certain elements remain consistent. The warrior sees angelic hosts wielding blades of flame, striding across the stars and driving back writhing shadows with righteous fury. He witnesses glorious battles from both past and future, scenes from the siege of Terra mixed with conflicts yet to come. Most importantly, he experiences an overwhelming certainty that he has been selected by the God Emperor as his mortal vessel upon the field of battle. When the vision passes, the warrior knows with absolute conviction that his life has changed forever. The chosen warrior presents himself to the chaplains for scrutiny. They examine his testimony, searching for any sign of delusion or false prophecy. The visions of the Emperor's champion are sacred, but they must also be authentic. Once the chaplains are satisfied that the warrior has truly been touched by divine will, they anoint him and declare him the Emperor's champion. From that moment forward, he is set apart from his brothers, standing alone in the searing light of the God Emperor's gaze. The Emperor's champion is granted the most sacred relics of the chapter. He bears the black sword, a power weapon of incredible potency, whose first wielder was Sigismund himself. Each black sword is a masterwork blade, carefully maintained by the chapter's artificers and capable of cutting through the thickest armor. The Emperor's champion also dons the armor of faith, blessed ceramite that has turned aside attacks that would fell lesser warriors. These items are ancient beyond measure, dating back to the very founding of the chapter, and they carry the spiritual weight of 10,000 years of warfare. With these weapons and armor, yet the Emperor's champion goes forth to seek out the mightiest enemies on the battlefield. His duty is to challenge them to single combat, to strike down the champions of darkness, just as Sigismund once did during the siege of Terra. The Emperor's vision guides him, manifesting as a golden light that burns brightest around the most dangerous foes. Lesser enemies are swatted aside as the champion moves inexorably toward his designated target, driven by certainty that transcends mere skill or courage. The existence of an Emperor's champion is both inspirational and ominous for the Black Templars. His presence on the battlefield is a sign of the God Emperor's favor, proof that their devotion has been recognized by the divine. Warriors fight with renewed fervor when the Emperor's champion strides among them, knowing that they battle alongside one touched by holy power. But the position also carries a dark weight. The duty of the Emperor's champion traditionally ends in death.
You know, what really strikes me about the Black Templars is how they represent the Imperium's ideals taken to their absolute extreme. Most Space Marines chapters serve the Emperor, but the Black Templars worship him, and I think that's what makes them so compelling as a faction. They're not morally grey, they're black and white in the most literal sense. There's something both terrifying and admirable about warriors who have such absolute conviction that they've been fighting non-stop for 10,000 years. No breaks, no rest, just eternal war. It makes me wonder, is that dedication heroic or is it tragic? Maybe it's both. Either way, the Black Templars don't care what we think, they know their purpose and nothing will stop them from fulfilling it. But anyways, that's just my 2 cents. Let's get back to the story.
These warriors seek out the most dangerous enemies and duel them without regard for their own survival. Most Emperor's champions do not live to see the end of the battle in which they are chosen. When an Emperor's champion falls, it is considered a bad omen, a sign that the God Emperor's favor has been withdrawn or that the battle was lost despite his intervention. But even in death, the champion has fulfilled his sacred duty. His name and deeds are recorded in the chapter's histories, preserved for all time as an example of devotion and sacrifice. If his body can be recovered, it is interred with full honors, and his black sword and armor of faith are returned to the chapter's armory to await the next warrior who will be chosen to bear them. The tradition of the Emperor's champion is not unique to the Black Templars. Though they practice it with greater fervor and regularity, than any other chapter. Some Imperial Fist's successor chapters have occasionally fielded their own champions, typically when their warriors compete for the honor, rather than being chosen through visions. The Crimson Fists particularly have a history of Emperor's champions, though their practice of the tradition decreased significantly after the devastation of their chapter during the invasion of Rin's world. What makes the Black Templars tradition unique is the religious conviction that surrounds it. To the Black Templars, what the Emperor's champion is not merely a ceremonial role or a tactical position. He is a living miracle, proof of the God Emperor's active intervention in the affairs of the galaxy. When a warrior receives the vision, the Black Templars believe he is experiencing the memories of Sigismund himself, seeing the same shifting vistas of warring angels and vengeful gods that the first Emperor's champion witnessed during the darkest days of the Horus heresy. Only those who have served as Emperor's champion and survived can truly understand what Sigismund experienced and the weight of duty he carried. For most, the position ends with death on the battlefield, so there are few who can speak to what it means to carry that burden and then lay it down. Those rare veterans who do survive speak of a fundamental change in their perspective, and of seeing the universe through different eyes and understanding truths that cannot be communicated through mere words. On the tabletop and in the lore, the Emperor's champion is invariably presented as a figure of terrible power and implacable will. Clad in ornate armor and wielding the black sword, he cuts through enemy ranks with contemptuous ease, seeking always the greatest challenge. When he finds a worthy opponent, the duel that follows is both a test of martial skill and a spiritual contest, the Emperor's chosen warrior against whatever dark powers his enemy serves. The champion fights with divine inspiration and supernatural focus, protected by faith and armed with righteous fury. The practice of selecting an Emperor's champion before each major engagement has become such an integral part of Black Templars culture that it shapes their entire approach to warfare. They go into battle knowing that one among them may be called to transcendent duty, that the God Emperor might reach down and touch one of their brothers with divine purpose. This possibility infuses their preparations with additional solemnity and reinforces their conviction that they fight not merely as soldiers, but as instruments of holy will. Faith made manifest, the Black Templars' approach to war. If one word could capture the essence of the Black Templars' combat doctrine, it would be zealotry. They do not approach warfare with the cold calculation of the Imperial Fists or the flexible adaptability of the Ultramarines. They do not employ the guerrilla tactics of the Raven Guard or the overwhelming force of the Salamanders. The Black Templars wage war as an act of worship, and their tactics reflect that fundamental truth. Above all else, the Black Templars prefer close combat. While they possess the full range of weapons available to Space Marines, including heavy support weapons and long-range firepower, these are viewed as tools to enable their true purpose, closing with the enemy and destroying them in melee. A Black Templars assault is a terrifying thing to witness. Warriors in black and white armor advance implacably through enemy fire, their prayers and battle cries rising above the thunder of weapons, their faith seemingly proof against the bullets and energy beams that would fell other soldiers. This preference for melee combat is not mere preference, but deeply embedded in the chapter's culture. They believe that there is spiritual truth in close combat, that meeting an enemy blade to blade is the purest expression of the warrior's purpose. Ranged weapons can eliminate targets from a distance, but they lack the visceral reality of looking into an enemy's eyes as you strike them down. The Black Templars want that connection, need it as confirmation that they are performing the God Emperor's work with their own hands, rather than through mechanical intermediaries. To facilitate their assault-focused tactics, the Black Templars developed specialized equipment. Most famous is the Land Raider Crusader, and a variant of the standard Land Raider assault transport that trades its lascannons for hurricane-pattern bolters and expanded troop capacity. The Land Raider Crusader was invented during the Vinculus Crusade, when the Black Templars found themselves needing to breach heavily fortified hive cities on the world of Gerulus. Traditional assault tactics were failing against the rebels' defensive positions, and casualties were mounting. It was brother artificer Semagus who designed the solution. The Crusader variant could smash through enemy fortifications and disgorge entire squads of Astartes directly into close combat, using its hurricane bolters to shred infantry that attempted to stop the assault. The design proved so effective that the Black Templars adopted it enthusiastically, and it has since spread to other chapters who recognize its utility. But for the Black Templars, the Land Raider Crusader is more than just an effective weapon system. It is a symbol of their approach to warfare, unstoppable aggression delivered with overwhelming force. Before battle, the Black Templars engage in extensive prayer and meditation. These are not brief rituals but hours-long ceremonies conducted by the chaplains, during which the warriors prepare their minds and souls for the violence to come. The chaplains recite litanies, powerful prayers that invoke the God Emperor's favor and steel the Black Templars against fear and doubt. These litanies are not mere words, but weapons in their own right, tools that sharpen the warrior's focus and amplify their fervor to supernatural levels. The effect of these litanies should not be underestimated. While the exact mechanism is unclear, possibly psychosomatic or potentially involving some subtle interaction with the warp itself, Black Templars who have been properly prepared through litanies fight with demonstrably greater effectiveness. They move faster, strike harder, and endure wounds that might incapacitate warriors who lack such spiritual fortification. Their chaplains lead them in chants even during combat, their voices carrying over the din of battle to remind their brothers of their sacred duty. The Black Templars also practice binding their weapons to their wrists with chains, a tradition inherited from Sigismund and his friendship with Khan of the World Eaters. The chains ensure that even if a warrior's grip fails, or if he is struck unconscious, his weapons remain with him. More symbolically, they represent the Black Templars' absolute commitment to their cause. The chains cannot be quickly released. A warrior bound to his weapons has committed himself fully to the battle, has declared that he will not retreat or surrender, that he will fight until victory or death. This tradition reflects a broader truth about the Black Templars. They do not believe in half measures. When they commit to a crusade, they do so absolutely. When they engage an enemy, they pursue them to complete destruction. The concept of a negotiated peace or a strategic withdrawal is foreign to their nature. They are crusaders, and crusaders do not stop until the infidels have been purged from holy ground. Their hatred of psykers deserves special mention, as it shapes their approach to both recruitment and combat. The Black Templars refuse to maintain a librarius, the organization of psyker space marines that most chapters employ. They view psychic powers with suspicion and disgust, seeing them as inherently corrupting and dangerous. This stance traces back to the Council of Nicaea, where the Emperor decreed limitations on psyker deployment within the Space Marine legions. While that decree was later overturned by necessity during the Horus Heresy, and most chapters now employ librarians without concern, the Black Templars have held firm to what they believe was the Emperor's original intent. Any Black Templars aspirant who displays psychic ability is immediately rejected, regardless of his other qualities. The chapter would rather lose a potentially excellent warrior than risk the corruption that psykers might bring. When fighting enemies who employ psychic powers, the Black Templars attack with a special fury, their hatred of witchcraft driving them to take extreme risks to eliminate psyker threats. They have developed specialized tactics and equipment for anti-psyker operations, and their absolute faith in the God Emperor serves as a form of spiritual protection against warp-based attacks. This rejection of psykers has not hindered the Black Templars' effectiveness. If anything, it has reinforced their identity and given them a clear ideological position that distinguishes them from other chapters. They need no librarians because they have faith, and faith has proven sufficient time and again to see them through the darkest battles. Before each major engagement, the Black Templars swear sacred vows that provide tangible benefits on the battlefield. These Templar vows are oaths that the warriors undertake as a crusade, binding themselves to particular modes of conduct and receiving spiritual strength in return. A crusade might vow to accept any challenge regardless of the odds, gaining additional ferocity and armor penetration in melee combat at the cost of being unable to retreat from engagement. Another might vow to abhor the witch, gaining enhanced movement to close with psychers, but forfeiting the ability to perform certain tactical actions. These vows are not merely motivational tools, but real metaphysical compacts. The Black Templars believe that by swearing these oaths before the God Emperor, they bind themselves to his will and receive his blessing in return. The vows transform them, make them more than merely skilled warriors, and turn them into instruments of divine retribution. When a Black Templar's crusade has sworn its vow, every warrior feels the weight of that oath and the power it grants. To break such a vow would be unthinkable, a betrayal not just of their brothers, but of the God Emperor himself. In combat, the Black Templars are relentless. They advance under fire with seeming disregard for danger, their faith protecting them as surely as their armor. When they reach melee range, they explode into violence, chainswords screaming and power weapons crackling as they tear through enemy formations. They do not fight with the cold precision of some chapters or the elegant technique of others. They fight with fury, with rage given purpose and direction by absolute faith. It is terrifying to behold and nearly impossible to withstand. 10,000 years of war, the history of the Black Templars across 10 millennia could fill libraries. Every crusade they have undertaken, every world they have liberated or conquered, every enemy they have destroyed represents a chapter in their endless saga. But certain campaigns and crusades stand out, moments when the Black Templars' actions shaped the fate of entire sectors or demonstrated the full extent of their capabilities. One of the earliest and most significant crusades was the completion of the Great Scouring, the campaign to drive the traitor legions from imperial space after the Horus Heresy. With the formation of the Black Templars, Sigismund led his new chapter to the Donatello system to purge it of chaos forces. This was one of the final campaigns of the Scouring, and the Black Templars approached it with characteristic thoroughness. A force of Night Lords who refused to retreat, giving their allies time to escape into the Eye of Terror, was destroyed utterly. No quarter was given, no mercy shown. The Black Templars established immediately that they would be an unforgiving enemy to traitors. In the early 34th millennium, during an event known as the Howling, the Black Templars ended the Catalexis heresy by executing the Cacodominus, an alien cyborg with formidable psychic powers that controlled the populations of 1,300 planetary systems. The kill was necessary, but its consequences were catastrophic. When the Cacodominus died, its death scream echoed through the warp, burning out the minds of billions of astropaths and distorting the signal of the Astronomicon. Millions of Imperial ships were lost in the resulting chaos, and entire subsectors descended into barbarism without the guidance of the Adeptus Terra. It was a Pyrrhic victory, purchased at terrible cost, but the Black Templars never questioned whether they had made the right decision. The alien had to die, regardless of consequences. During the 39th millennium, the Black Templars prosecuted the Donian Crusade to combat a massive population of green-skinned invaders sweeping through the Donian sector. This crusade lasted for more than a decade and saw numerous notable engagements, including the defense of the Forge World Nickel 5, where Marshal Ostein was killed, leading his warriors against overwhelming numbers. The crusade continued under his successor, Marshal Werner, who eventually achieved victory after 17 years of continuous warfare. The Donian Crusade demonstrated the Black Templars' willingness to commit to extended campaigns and their ability to maintain operational effectiveness across years of constant combat. But no series of campaigns in recent history has been more significant or better documented than the Black Templars' involvement in the wars for Armageddon, particularly the Third War. Armageddon is one of the most strategically important worlds in Imperial space, a massive hive world whose foundries produce weapons and vehicles for countless Imperial Guard regiments. It is also the site of repeated invasions by green-skinned forces, each one larger and more dangerous than the last. Or when the great warlord Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka returned to Armageddon at the head of the largest force of its kind ever assembled, threatening to drown the planet in a tide of savage warriors. The call for aid went out across the Imperium. High Marshal Helbrecht answered that call by dispatching 3 full crusades to Armageddon's defense. The commitment was enormous, representing a significant portion of the chapter's total strength, and it demonstrated the Black Templars' willingness to face any threat, regardless of the odds. High Marshal Helbrecht took personal command of the Black Templars' contribution to Armageddon's defense. His extensive naval experience made him a natural choice to coordinate the combined Space Marine fleet, and he threw himself into the campaign with characteristic zeal. But the Black Templars fought both in the Void and on Armageddon's surface, engaging in boarding actions against space hulks while their brothers below battled through ash wastes and hive cities. One crusade was assigned to defend Hive Hellsreach, one of Armageddon's major population centers, which came under siege by tens of thousands of green-skinned warriors. This defense was led by Reclusiarch Grimaldus, who had recently been elevated to that position. Grimaldus and just over 100 Black Templars held the Temple of the Emperor Ascendant, a massive basilica that had stood since Armageddon's earliest days of colonization. The defense of that temple became legendary, with Grimaldus and his warriors fighting against impossible odds, while the population of the Hive watched and prayed. The Battle of Hellsreach lasted for months, or with the Black Templars enduring siege conditions that would have broken lesser warriors. Supplies dwindled, ammunition ran low, warriors fell one by one to enemy attacks or simple exhaustion. But Grimaldus refused to yield, and his faith inspired not just his fellow Black Templars, but the ordinary humans of the Hive as well. When the siege was finally broken and Imperial reinforcements arrived, Grimaldus had become a figure of legend, his name spoken with reverence throughout the Armageddon system. The space war was equally brutal. Helbrecht led numerous boarding actions against green-skinned ships, including assaults on space hulks that were essentially floating cities converted into war vessels. These operations were extraordinarily dangerous, with Black Templars' strike teams fighting through twisted corridors and vast holds filled with savage warriors. The Imperial Navy, under Admiral Parol's command, worked in coordination with the Black Templars' fleet to steadily reduce the invaders' numbers, and though losses were heavy on both sides, the tide gradually turned in the Imperium's favor. During one particularly dangerous boarding action, Helbrecht and his forces attacked a space hulk called the Malevolent Dread. The assault initially seemed successful, but the structure had been rigged with explosives and traps. What should have been a victory turned into a desperate fighting retreat as the space hulk began to break apart around them. Helbrecht escaped, but the experience reminded him that even the Black Templars could not overcome every obstacle through faith and fury alone. The Third War for Armageddon eventually ground to a stalemate, with neither side able to achieve total victory. The green-skinned warlord Gazkul himself eventually fled the planet, escaping aboard one of the massive space hulks before the Black Templars could corner him. Helbrecht swore an oath that he would hunt the warlord across the galaxy and ensure that he paid for the devastation he had caused. He secured the agreement of Commissar Yarrick, Armageddon's greatest hero, to join him in this pursuit. That hunt continues to the present day, with Helbrecht and his forces tracking Gazkul through Imperial space and beyond, determined to fulfill the oath no matter how long it takes. The years following Armageddon also saw Helbrecht engaged in other significant conflicts. On the ice world of Schrödinger 7, the Black Templars encountered forces of the Necrons led by Imhotep, the Stormlord. The fighting on that frozen world culminated in a personal duel between Helbrecht and Imhotep that left the High Marshal severely wounded. Imhotep severed Helbrecht's right hand before casting him from an ice bridge into the caverns below. It was a devastating defeat, and Helbrecht carries the memory of it still. He vowed vengeance against the Necron overlord and has sought opportunities to fulfill that vow, though Imhotep has proven a frustratingly elusive enemy. These campaigns represent only a fraction of the Black Templars' activities across 10,000 years. For every named crusade, there are dozens that go unrecorded except in the chapter's own archives. For every famous victory, there are countless smaller battles against pirates, heretics, and aliens that the wider Imperium never hears about. The Black Templars do not fight for glory or recognition. They fight because their oath demands it, because their faith compels them, because the alternative is unthinkable. The hero of Hell's Reach, Chaplain Grimaldus. Among the countless warriors who have served the Black Templars across 10 millennia, few have achieved the legendary status of Reclusiarch Grimaldus. His story is one of faith tested to its absolute limits, of a single warrior holding against impossible odds through nothing more than conviction and willpower. To understand Grimaldus is to understand what the Black Templars represent at their finest and most uncompromising. Grimaldus was not always a Reclusiarch, not always the spiritual leader of an entire crusade. He began as all Black Templars do, as a neophyte learning the ways of war from the initiates who mentored him. He progressed through the ranks, proving himself in battle after battle, demonstrating not just martial skill, but the absolute faith that the chapter demands from all its warriors. His dedication caught the attention of the chaplains, those keepers of the chapter's spiritual fire, and he was selected for training in the Reclusium. Under the tutelage of Chaplain Mordred, Grimaldus learned the sacred duties of a Black Templar's chaplain. He memorized the litanies that would inspire his brothers to feats of heroism. He studied the chapter's history, absorbing the lessons of 10,000 years of warfare. He learned to recognize the signs of wavering faith and to strengthen his brothers through word and deed. Most importantly, he came to understand that a chaplain's role was not merely ceremonial, but essential to the chapter's very existence. The Black Templars fight because they believe, and the chaplains are the ones who maintain that belief. When Mordred fell in battle, killed by enemies whose names have been lost to history, but whose deaths were certainly avenged, Grimaldus found himself unexpectedly elevated to the position of Reclusiarch. This was an enormous responsibility, one that placed him as the spiritual leader of an entire crusade. High Marshal Helbrecht himself confirmed the appointment, seeing in the relatively young chaplain a fire of conviction that reminded him of the chapter's greatest spiritual leaders. Grimaldus accepted the honor with the gravity it deserved, an understanding that he now bore responsibility not just for his own faith, but for maintaining the zeal of every warrior under his command. The true test of Grimaldus's faith came during the Third War for Armageddon. When High Marshal Helbrecht dispatched 3 crusades to defend that vital world against the largest gathering of greenskin warriors ever assembled, Grimaldus led 109 Black Templars to the defense of Hive Hell's Reach. It seemed like a straightforward assignment at first, a matter of reinforcing the city's existing defenses and providing the leadership and firepower that Space Marines bring to any engagement. But the situation rapidly deteriorated. The green tide sweeping up from Armageddon's southern wastes was far larger than initial reports had suggested. Tens of thousands of savage warriors, supported by crude but effective war machines, descended upon Hell's Reach with the clear intention of reducing it to rubble. The city's PDF forces were brave but outmatched. The Imperial Guard regiment assigned to the defense was too small. The Titan Legion, those god machines that could turn the tide of battle, was scattered across the planet dealing with other threats. Hell's Reach stood on the brink of annihilation. Grimaldus made the decision that would define his legend. Rather than spreading his forces throughout the city or attempting to organize a mobile defense, he chose to make his stand at the Temple of the Emperor Ascendant. This massive basilica had stood since the earliest days of Armageddon's colonization, a monument to faith that dominated Hell's Reach's skyline. It was not the most tactically advantageous position, or not the most defensible location, but it was sacred ground, and Grimaldus believed that if Hell's Reach fell, it should be after the enemies of the Emperor had broken themselves against his temple. The decision was controversial. Some argued that concentrating the Black Templars in one location was tactically unsound, that they could be more effective if deployed throughout the city. Others questioned whether defending a single building, no matter how symbolically important, served any real military purpose. Grimaldus listened to these concerns with his characteristic intensity and then dismissed them. The Temple of the Emperor Ascendant would be held. That was not subject to debate. What followed was one of the most famous sieges in recent imperial history. For months, Herr Grimaldus and his Black Templars held the temple against wave after wave of green-skinned assailants. The enemy attacked with savage fury, throwing themselves at the temple's walls with reckless abandon. They brought crude artillery to bear, hammering the ancient structure with shells and rockets. They deployed massive war machines, towering constructs bristling with guns. They sent their greatest champions to challenge the defenders in combat, and the Black Templars held. They held through days that became weeks, through weeks that became months. They held as their ammunition dwindled and their supplies ran low. They held as their numbers decreased, warriors falling one by one to enemy fire or being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. They held because Grimaldus told them they would hold. Because his faith was so absolute that it became their faith. Because to even consider surrender or retreat would be to betray everything they were. Grimaldus was everywhere during the siege. When a section of wall was breached, he was there, leading the counterattack that drove the invaders back. When warriors began to falter under the strain of endless combat, he was there, delivering sermons that rekindled their fire. When enemy champions challenged the defenders, he was there, his Crozius Arcanum crackling as it crushed alien skulls. He slept perhaps an hour a day, spending every other moment either fighting or maintaining the morale of his forces. The civilian population of Hell's Reach witnessed these battles from their shelters and hab blocks, or watching through view screens and windows as the black-armored giants fought to save their city. To them, Grimaldus became something more than a space marine, more even than a symbol of imperial might. He became a living saint, proof that the God Emperor watched over his faithful. They began to pray to him, not as a deity, but as an intercessor, begging him to save them as he seemed to be saving the temple. Their faith in him was absolute, and in a strange way, it strengthened him in return. Throughout the siege, Grimaldus maintained contact with what remained of the city's command structure. He coordinated with Princeps Zaha of the Titan Invictus, which had been abandoned by its crew early in the battle, but was later reclaimed and piloted by a skeleton crew of desperate soldiers. But he worked with the Imperial Guard units still fighting in other districts, providing what support he could when his position allowed. He even communicated with High Marshal Helbrecht, who was fighting his own desperate battles in orbit and across Armageddon's surface. The temple itself became a character in the siege. Its walls, ancient and blessed by millennia of prayer, seemed to resist damage that should have brought them down. Shells that should have penetrated deep into the structure instead left only superficial scars. When sections of wall did collapse, they often fell in ways that created defensive barriers rather than breaches. Some attributed this to the building's solid construction and the skill of its long-dead architects. Others, including Grimaldus himself, believed the God Emperor protected his holy ground. As the weeks wore on, the Black Templars' casualties mounted. Warriors who had fought for decades or even centuries fell defending the temple. Each death was a blow to the defenders' strength, but Grimaldus ensured that each was also an inspiration. He memorialized the fallen in his sermons, speaking their names and recounting their deeds. The dead became reasons to continue fighting, proof that the defense of the temple was worth any price. The turning point came when Imperial reinforcements finally broke through to Hell's Reach. Fresh Guard regiments, supported by Space Marines from other chapters, pushed into the city and began to relieve the defensive positions. When they reached the Temple of the Emperor Ascendant, they found it battered but unbroken, its walls scarred by months of combat but still standing. And there, amid the rubble and the bodies of countless enemies, stood Grimaldus and what remained of his command. Only a fraction of the original 109 Black Templars survived to see relief arrive, but they had held. Against odds that should have been insurmountable, Through a siege that should have broken them, they had maintained their position. The temple of the Emperor Ascendant still stood, its spires still reached toward the sky, and the enemies of the Emperor lay dead in heaps before its walls. Grimaldus had fulfilled his vow, had proven that faith and fury could overcome any obstacle. The defense of Hell's Reach made Grimaldus a legend throughout the Imperium. His name became known far beyond the Black Templars, spoken with reverence by Imperial Guard soldiers and civilians alike. When people spoke of the Third War for Armageddon, they spoke of many heroes, but Grimaldus's name was always among them. He had become the embodiment of what a Space Marine chaplain should be, not merely a warrior who wore the trappings of religious office, but a true believer whose faith was so powerful it could sustain an entire army through the darkest of times. After the war, Grimaldus returned to his duties with the Black Templars, continuing to serve as reclusiarch and spiritual guide. But he was changed by the experience, tempered by months of desperate combat, and by the weight of all those who had fallen under his command. He carried their names with him, spoke them in his prayers, ensured that their sacrifices were remembered. The defense of Hell's Reach had proven the power of absolute faith, and Grimaldus embodied that lesson for all who met him. His story is taught to every Black Templar, held up as an example of what the chapter represents at its finest. When new recruits question whether faith alone is sufficient, when veterans wonder if their sacrifices have meaning, when entire crusades face situations that seem hopeless, they remember Grimaldus. They remember that one chaplain and 100 warriors held a single building against an army, not through superior tactics or overwhelming firepower, but through absolute conviction that they would not fail. If Grimaldus could hold Hell's Reach, then any Black Templar can face any challenge, because the same faith that sustained him sustains them all. The rejection of the witch, the Black Templars and Psykers. One of the most defining characteristics of the Black Templars, and one that sets them apart from most other Space Marine chapters, is their absolute hatred and rejection of Psykers. While many in the Imperium view psychic abilities with suspicion and concern, the Black Templars take this to an extreme that borders on fanatic. To them, Psykers are not merely dangerous or potentially corrupting. They are abominations, manifestations of weakness and corruption that have no place in the Emperor's armies. This stance requires some historical context to understand fully. During the Great Crusade, the Space Marine legions employed librarians, Psyker Space Marines who wielded the powers of the warp in service to the Emperor. These warriors were invaluable for their abilities to communicate across vast distances, to detect threats that mundane senses could not perceive, and to combat enemy Psykers on equal terms. But as the Crusade progressed, concerns grew about the dangers these Psykers represented. The warp was not merely a tool to be used, but a realm of horror filled with entities that sought to corrupt and destroy. These concerns culminated in the Council of Nicaea, a gathering where the fate of Psykers within the legions was debated before the Emperor himself. Some Primarchs, particularly Magnus the Red of the Thousand Sons, argued passionately for the continued use of psychic powers, viewing them as essential tools that could be wielded responsibly with proper training and discipline. Others, including Mortarion of the Death Guard and Leman Russ of the Space Wolves, argued with equal passion that Psykers were inherently dangerous and should be restricted or eliminated entirely. But the Emperor's decision appeared to side with the restrictionists. He decreed that librarians would be disbanded and psychic powers would no longer be practiced within the Space Marine legions. This decision was controversial and not entirely clear in its details, which would lead to confusion and disagreement in the years to come. But those who were present at Nicaea, including some who would later form the Black Templars, understood it as a clear condemnation of psychic power. When the Horus heresy erupted, the Emperor's decree was quickly set aside by necessity. Loyalist forces found themselves needing every weapon at their disposal, including the abilities of their librarians. The ban was effectively overturned, and Psykers once again took their place in the Space Marine legions. But not everyone accepted this reversal. To some, the emperor's word at Nicaea represented his true intent, and the subsequent overturning was a pragmatic compromise forced by desperate circumstances rather than a genuine change of heart. Sigismund and the warriors who would become the Black Templars were among those who held to the original decree. They believed, and their descendants still believe, that the emperor's initial judgment was correct. Psykers are dangerous. They provide openings for corruption from the warp. Their very existence represents a weakness in humanity's armor against the horrors of chaos. Therefore, the Black Templars refuse to employ them under any circumstances. This means the Black Templars have no librarius, no organization of Psyker Space Marines like virtually every other chapter maintains. When aspirants are recruited and tested, any who display psychic ability are immediately rejected, regardless of how strong or talented they might otherwise be. The chapter would rather lose a potentially excellent warrior than accept the risk that a psyker represents. This is not a difficult decision for them. It is simply adherence to what they believe was the Emperor's will. The practical implications of this policy are significant. Psykers provide capabilities that are difficult to replicate through mundane means. They can communicate across vast distances instantly, bypassing the need for astropathic relays. They can detect hidden enemies and sense threats before they manifest. They can shield their brothers against psychic attacks from enemy psykers. The Black Templars forsake all of these advantages because they believe the cost is too high. Instead, as they rely on faith and other methods to accomplish what librarians might provide. When they need to communicate across distances, they use traditional channels, even if those are slower or less reliable. When they face enemy psykers, they trust in their faith to protect them and simply attack with overwhelming aggression, seeking to kill the psyker before his powers can be brought to bear effectively. When they encounter warp phenomena or demonic entities, they meet them with blessed weapons and holy fury rather than psychic countermeasures. This approach has its costs. The Black Templars have suffered losses that might have been prevented if they employed psykers. They have faced situations where librarians could have provided crucial intelligence or turned the tide of battle, but they accept these costs as necessary. To them, the alternative, accepting psykers into their ranks, would be a far greater compromise than any tactical disadvantage they might suffer. Their hatred of psykers extends beyond merely refusing to employ them. When the Black Templars encounter enemy psykers, they attack them with a special fury. Witches, as they call all psykers regardless of whether they serve Chaos or the Imperium, are priority targets to be eliminated at any cost. Black Templars will take suicidal risks to close with and kill enemy psykers, viewing their destruction as a sacred duty that transcends normal tactical considerations. This has led to some awkward situations when the Black Templars have operated alongside Imperial forces that include sanctioned psykers. Astra Militarum regiments often include sanctioned psykers as part of their command staff. They're using their abilities for communication and battlefield awareness. The Inquisition employs psykers extensively, both as interrogators and as weapons against enemies that mundane force cannot touch. Even other Space Marine chapters bring their librarians to battle without shame or concern. The Black Templars tolerate these allied psykers because they must. They understand that the Imperium as a whole has not accepted their interpretation of the Emperor's will regarding psychic powers. They recognize that sanctioned psykers serve the Imperium loyally, and that the astropaths who make interstellar communication possible are essential to humanity's survival. But tolerance is not acceptance. Black Templars will work alongside sanctioned psykers when necessary, but they do so with visible discomfort and maintain as much distance as possible. If a sanctioned psyker were to show any sign of corruption or loss of control, the Black Templars would not hesitate to eliminate them immediately. This attitude sometimes causes friction with other Imperial forces. Other Space Marine chapters, particularly those like the Blood Angels or the Space Wolves, whose librarians are deeply integrated into their combat doctrine, find the Black Templars' stance excessive and potentially dangerous. After all, refusing to employ one of your most powerful weapons because of ideological concerns seems like a self-imposed handicap. The Inquisition, while appreciating the Black Templars' vigilance against corruption, also worries that their inflexibility on this issue might lead to them taking action against sanctioned imperial psychers. But the Black Templars are unmoved by such concerns. Yet they have maintained their stance for 10,000 years, through periods when their refusal to employ psychers put them at significant disadvantage, and they have survived and thrived nonetheless. To them, this is proof that their position is correct. The Emperor's will does not require psychers to be fulfilled. Faith is sufficient, and faith is what they offer. There is also a deeper theological component to their rejection of psychers. The Black Templars believe that psychic powers represent humanity's connection to the warp, and the warp is the realm of chaos. Every psyker is, to some extent, a crack in reality through which the horrors of the warp might enter the material universe. By refusing to employ psychers, the Black Templars are keeping themselves pure, ensuring that their chapter remains uncontaminated by the warp's influence. And they fight chaos with steel and faith rather than borrowing chaos's own tools. This purity extends to their recruitment and gene seed practices. When the chapter's apothecaries harvest gene seed from fallen brothers, they ensure it is properly consecrated and purified before it is implanted into new recruits. They believe that maintaining the purity of their genetic legacy is essential to maintaining the chapter's character. Any hint of mutation or deviation is cause for rejection, and psychic ability is treated as the most dangerous mutation of all. The practical effect of all this is that the Black Templars operate at a level of psychic nullity unusual among Space Marines. Where other chapters have librarians whose presence creates a psychic signature that can be detected and tracked, the Black Templars have no such signature. When enemy psychers attempt to read their thoughts or predict their movements through warp sight, they find nothing but a black void of faith. Some Black Templars believe this is the God Emperor's reward for their purity, a divine protection granted to those who refuse to compromise with the warp's temptations. The Fleet, Cities of Faith, Among the Stars. The Black Templars' rejection of a traditional homeworld in favor of a crusading fleet existence has shaped every aspect of their chapter, but perhaps nowhere is this more apparent than in the vessels they call home. These are not merely warships, though they certainly fulfill that function with devastating effectiveness. They are mobile fortresses, cathedral ships that combine military necessity with religious devotion in ways that reflect the chapter's unique character. At the heart of the Black Templars' fleet is the Eternal Crusader, one of the few remaining Gloriana-class battleships in the Imperium. These massive vessels were built during the Great Crusade to serve as flagships for the Space Marine legions, and each was a masterwork of engineering and warfare. Most were destroyed during the heresy or the millennia that followed. That the Eternal Crusader survives is testament both to the Black Templars' care for their most sacred relic and to the vessel's own legendary durability. The Eternal Crusader is enormous, even by the standards of Space Marine capital ships. Its dimensions are difficult to convey meaningfully, but it is large enough to carry multiple companies of Black Templars, along with their equipment, vehicles, and support personnel, with space remaining for extensive chapels, and training facilities, and quarters. Its weapon systems could level cities from orbit, and its armor has withstood attacks that would have destroyed lesser vessels. It has fought in countless engagements across 10,000 years, and its hull bears the scars of battles dating back to the very founding of the chapter. But the Eternal Crusader is more than just a warship. It is the spiritual center of the entire chapter, the closest thing the Black Templars have to a homeworld. Aboard this vessel, the High Marshal maintains his command, coordinating the activities of crusades across the galaxy. The chapter's most sacred relics are kept in its heavily fortified reliquaries, protected by layers of blessed armor and watched over by honor guards who have sworn to defend them with their lives. And the greatest chapels and cathedrals of the chapter are here, spaces where thousands can gather for prayer and ceremony. When the High Marshal calls a council of marshals, which happens rarely, but at critical moments in the chapter's history, it is aboard the Eternal Crusader that they gather. These councils have made decisions that shaped Imperial history. It was in the Eternal Crusader's Great Hall that the chapter decided how to respond to the plague of unbelief. It was here that they discussed their response to the opening of the Great Rift. And it was here that High Marshal Helbrecht met with Primarch Robert Guilliman to discuss the integration of Primaris Marines, a meeting that could have ended in violence, but instead led to the chapter's acceptance of these new warriors. The other ships of the Black Templars' fleet are similarly impressive, though none match the Eternal Crusader's scale or significance. Battle barges, those massive capital ships that serve as the primary warships of Space Marine chapters, make up the core of each Crusade's naval power. These vessels are designed to project force, to carry Space Marines into battle, and provide them with the firepower needed to dominate any engagement. A Black Templar's battle barge is a cathedral in its own right, its hull decorated with religious iconography and its internal spaces filled with chapels and shrines. Strike cruisers form the backbone of the fleet, smaller and more nimble than battle barges, but still formidable warships capable of holding their own against most threats. As these vessels often serve as the flagships for smaller crusades or as supporting elements for larger ones. Each strike cruiser is home to several hundred Black Templars and contains all the facilities needed to sustain them for years of independent operations. Medical bays, training halls, armories, chapels, all are present in miniature. Beyond these capital ships, each crusade includes numerous supporting vessels. Rapid strike vessels for quick insertions and raids, bombardment ships for orbital fire support, transport vessels for carrying vehicles and supplies. The exact composition varies depending on the Crusade's mission and the High Marshal's assessment of what each force will need. But every Crusade fleet is designed to be completely self-sufficient, capable of operating without external support for extended periods. A life aboard these vessels is regimented and centered on warfare and worship. A Black Templar's day is divided between training, prayer, maintenance of equipment, and actual combat operations when battles occur. There is little time for recreation or personal pursuits, not that most Black Templars would desire such things. They are warriors of faith, and their ship is both their battlefield and their church. The ships themselves are maintained with religious devotion. Tech Marines and servitors constantly work to keep systems operating at peak efficiency, but they do so as an act of worship rather than mere maintenance. Every component is blessed before installation. Every repair is accompanied by prayers to the machine spirits that the Mechanicus believes inhabit all technology. The Black Templars take this even further than most chapters, as seeing their ships as holy artifacts that carry the God Emperor's warriors to battle and must therefore be maintained with appropriate reverence. This care has paid dividends across the millennia. Black Templars' vessels are known for their reliability and durability, often outlasting comparable ships from other chapters. Some attribute this to superior maintenance protocols. Others believe the ships themselves are blessed by the Emperor's favor. That faith literally keeps them functioning when technical specifications suggest they should fail. The Black Templars themselves see no contradiction between these explanations. Proper maintenance is an expression of faith, and the God Emperor rewards the faithful with his protection. The interior spaces of Black Templars' ships reflect the chapter's character, where other chapters might decorate their vessels with battle honors and strategic maps. The Black Templars fill their ships with religious iconography. Murals depicting the Emperor and his saints. Statues of Sigismund and other chapter heroes. Purity seals and scrolls of prayer covering every available surface. Walking through a Black Templar ship is like walking through a cathedral that happens to be armed with weapons capable of destroying planets. The chapels aboard these ships serve as the spiritual heart of each crusade. Here, before every battle, the warriors gather to pray and receive the blessings of the chaplains. The chaplains deliver sermons that can last for hours, recounting the chapter's history, reminding the warriors of their sacred duty. and working them into states of religious fervor that will serve them well in the coming battle. These are not merely morale-building exercises, but genuine religious ceremonies, and the Black Templars approach them with absolute seriousness. When not in transit or battle, the fleet often anchors at chapter keeps, scattered across Imperial space. These stops allow the crusade to replenish supplies, recruit new warriors, and repair any damage sustained during recent operations. The keeps also serve as sources of intelligence, with their small garrisons monitoring the local sector for threats that might require a crusade's attention. A Black Templars fleet might spend weeks or even months at a chapter keep, using the time to train, perform maintenance, and prepare for the next phase of their crusade. As the fleet's ability to appear anywhere in Imperial space makes the Black Templars uniquely flexible and dangerous. Unlike chapters tied to defending a specific homeworld or sector, the Black Templars can redeploy their forces to meet threats wherever they emerge. If reports reach them of a heretic uprising in one sector, they can divert a crusade to crush it. If alien raiders are plaguing Imperial shipping lanes, a Black Templars fleet can hunt them down and destroy them. This mobility is both a strategic asset and a reflection of their crusading philosophy. They are not defenders of static positions, but crusaders who go wherever the Emperor's enemies can be found. The chapter's modern era, when the Great Rift tore reality apart in what became known as the Noctis Aeterna, the galaxy plunged into a new age of darkness. The Astronomicon, that great psychic beacon that allows for warp travel, flickered and died in many regions. Entire crusade fleets found themselves cut off from the rest of the chapter, isolated in the dark, with no way to navigate or communicate. Some crusades vanished entirely during this period, their fates unknown to this day. The Black Templars' response to this catastrophe was characteristic of their nature. Rather than withdrawing to consolidate their strength or waiting for the situation to stabilize, they intensified their crusading. Those crusades still within the Imperium Sanctus, the half of the galaxy that retained connection to Terra, launched a vicious purge against the wave of mutation and heresy that had erupted in the wake of the Great Rift's opening. They established new chapter keeps on dozens of worlds, expanding their network of fortified positions and ensuring that they would have strategic bases from which to continue their operations. It was during this chaotic period that Reboot Guilliman returned to the Imperium. The Primarch of the Ultramarines, who had been in stasis for 10,000 years, was awakened to lead humanity through its darkest hour. He immediately launched the Indomitus Crusade, a massive military campaign to reconquer worlds lost to chaos and restore the Imperium's strength. As part of this effort, his torchbearer fleets carried a revolutionary new type of space marine, Primaris Astartes, warriors enhanced beyond even the already superhuman capabilities of standard space marines. Many expected the Black Templars to reject these Primaris marines. The chapter was famously resistant to change, and had maintained their traditions unchanged for 10 millennia, and viewed any alteration to the Emperor's work with deep suspicion. The genetic enhancements that created Primaris marines had been developed by Archmagos Belisarius Cawl, and while Cawl worked under Guilliman's authority, the Black Templars had no reason to trust a Mechanicus adept they had never met. Recognizing the potential for conflict, Guilliman himself traveled to meet with High Marshal Helbrecht aboard the Eternal Crusader. The Primarch understood that the Black Templars answered to no one except the Emperor, and that demanding their compliance would likely lead to open warfare. Instead, he appealed to Helbrecht's sense of duty. The Primaris Marines were a gift that would allow the Black Templars to prosecute their Eternal Crusade more effectively. They represented not a repudiation of the Emperor's work, but an enhancement of it, a way to make his warriors even more capable of defending humanity. Guilliman also reminded Helbrecht that the High Marshal had responsibilities to all of mankind, not just to his personal vendetta against the green-skinned warlord Ghazghkull. The Imperium needed the Black Templars at full strength, and the Primaris reinforcements would allow them to launch even more crusades simultaneously. Helbrecht, despite his initial reservations, saw the logic in Guilliman's arguments. He accepted the Primaris Marines into the chapter and promoted several of his sword brethren to the rank of marshal specifically to command new crusades composed of these enhanced warriors. The integration of Primaris Marines into the Black Templars did not proceed entirely smoothly. While Helbrecht's acceptance set the tone for the chapter as a whole, individual marshals and castellans reacted differently to the newcomers. Some embraced them eagerly, recognizing their enhanced capabilities and welcoming them as brothers. Others viewed them with suspicion, questioning whether these new warriors could truly understand what it meant to be a Black Templar when they had not grown up in the chapter's traditions. The most extreme reaction occurred during the Angevin Crusade, where one chaplain and his followers took their suspicion to its logical, terrible conclusion. They declared that the Primaris Marines were abominations created by Archmagos Call, and that anyone who supported them, including the Custodes' escorts and even Marshal Angevin himself, was a heretic. In a spasm of zealotry that shocked even other Black Templars, they killed the entire Torchbearer fleet, slaughtering Primaris Marines, Custodes, and their own brothers who had voted to accept the reinforcements. The aftermath of the Angevin Crusade incident was catastrophic. The crusade was nearly destroyed as a fighting force, and an investigation was ordered by Guilliman himself. An Imperial Fists Primaris led the inquiry, eventually defeating the offending Castellan in single combat and taking command of what remained of the Crusader host. The survivors were thrown immediately into combat against Wordbearer's Chaos Space Marines, and only a single neophyte survived that engagement. Ironically, that lone survivor later saved Guilliman's life during an assassination attempt, proving that the Primaris Marines could be as devoted to the Emperor as any traditional Black Templar. The Angevin incident stands as a cautionary tale about the dangers of zealotry taken to extremes. The Black Templars pride themselves on their absolute faith and uncompromising nature, but even they recognize that blind fanaticism that leads to fratricide serves no one except the enemies of humanity. The chaplain who led the purge believed he was protecting the chapter's purity, but instead, he nearly destroyed an entire crusade and murdered warriors who were trying to help the Imperium survive its darkest hour. Despite this incident, the incorporation of Primaris Marines into the Black Templars has generally been considered successful. The enhanced warriors have proven themselves in battle, if fighting with the same zealous fury as their older brothers. Some whisper that Black Templars who cross the Rubicon Primaris, the dangerous process of upgrading a standard Space Marine to Primaris specifications, have an unusually high survival rate. If true, the Black Templars attribute this to the Emperor's favor, viewing it as a reward for their faith. A chapter of living faith. What truly sets the Black Templars apart from other Space Marine chapters is not their organization or their tactics, but their unwavering conviction. They are not merely warriors who fight for the Imperium. They are holy warriors who fight for the God Emperor, and there is a profound difference between these two concepts. Most Space Marines maintain a secular view of the Emperor. They revere him as their genetic father and the greatest leader humanity has ever known, but they do not worship him as a deity. This was the Emperor's own preference during the Great Crusade. He promoted a rationalist, secular vision of human destiny, one that had no room for gods or divine intervention. The Imperium was to be built on reason and human achievement, not faith and prayer. But during the Horus Heresy, a religious movement emerged among the defenders of Terra. These were ordinary humans, not Space Marines, and they had witnessed the Emperor's power with their own eyes. They had seen him burn down the stars and shake the very foundations of reality with his will. To them, he was not merely a powerful man, but a god incarnate, the divine ruler of humanity who demanded worship and absolute devotion. This became the foundation of the imperial cult, the state religion that would dominate the Imperium for the next 10 millennia. Sigismund was touched by this movement. As the Emperor's champion during the siege, he fought before crowds of ordinary humans who saw him not as a Space Marine, but as a living saint, the chosen warrior of their god. Their faith in him was absolute, and in turn, he came to believe in the divinity they attributed to the Emperor. When he founded the Black Templars, he carried this conviction with him, and it became embedded in the chapter's culture. The Black Templars' faith is not a tactical consideration or a motivational tool. It is genuine religious belief that shapes every aspect of their existence. They pray before battle, not to psychologically prepare themselves, but to commune with their God. But they swear vows not as promises to themselves, but as sacred compacts with the divine. When they fight, they believe they are doing the God Emperor's work directly, that their blades are instruments of his will, and their victories are manifestations of his power. This makes them natural allies of the ecclesiarchy, the church of the imperial cult. While most Space Marine chapters maintain a respectful distance from religious authorities, viewing them as useful for controlling the masses, but not particularly relevant to the Astartes themselves, the Black Templars embrace the ecclesiarchy's teachings. They attend services when possible, listen to sermons delivered by priests and confessors, and sometimes even fight alongside Sisters of Battle from the Adepta Sororitas, the ecclesiarchy's military orders. Other Space Marine chapters find this disturbing. The Blood Angels and their successors, the Ultramarines and their vast empire of successor chapters, even the Imperial Fists, who are the Black Templars' parent chapter, all maintain a more traditional view of the Emperor. They respect the Black Templars' dedication and cannot question their loyalty, but they worry about the implications of Space Marines who view themselves as instruments of divine will rather than warriors of the Imperium. Faith can be a powerful weapon, but it can also be a dangerous one, leading to exactly the sort of zealotry that resulted in the Angevin Crusade incident. The Black Templars care nothing for such concerns. They do not require approval from other chapters or validation from imperial authorities. They answer to the Emperor alone, and his will is clear. The galaxy must be purged of his enemies, all of them, without exception or mercy. This is the sacred duty that Sigismund swore to prosecute eternally, and it is the duty that every Black Templar carries with absolute conviction. Their black armor is itself a symbol of faith. It dates back to Sigismund's appointment as the first emperor's champion, when his armor was painted black like the chaplains of the Reclusium, to signify that he served the emperor directly. Upon becoming High Marshal of the Black Templars, he maintained this tradition for his entire chapter. To this day, every Black Templar wears armor of black and white, the colors of devotion and purity. When they take to the field, they appear as a dark tide of righteous fury, their armor marked with purity seals and religious iconography, their weapons blessed and consecrated. The chapter's chaplains are among the most important figures in their organization, more so than in most other chapters. Where other Space Marines might view chaplains primarily as morale officers and ceremonial figures, the Black Templars see them as essential spiritual guides. A chaplain's role is to maintain the chapter's faith, to ensure that the warriors remember why they fight and for whom. Through sermons and litanies, through prayer and meditation, the chaplains keep the fire of zealotry burning bright across decades and centuries of continuous warfare. Grimaldus, who defended Hive Hellsreach during the Third War for Armageddon, exemplifies the Black Templars' chaplains at their finest. He was not merely a warrior who happened to hold a ceremonial position. He was a living embodiment of faith, and a warrior priest whose very presence inspired those around him to deeds beyond their normal capabilities. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of absolute conviction. When he fought, he did so with the certainty that the God Emperor guided his every blow. The ordinary humans of Hellsreach came to venerate him during the siege, and even after the battle ended, his name was spoken with reverence throughout the Armageddon system. This relationship with faith creates an interesting dynamic within the chapter. On one hand, the Black Templars are Space Marines, enhanced warriors with centuries of combat experience who understand tactics and strategy at a level far beyond normal humans. On the other hand, they are religious zealots who genuinely believe that their God watches over them and guides their actions. But these two aspects of their character do not conflict, because for the Black Templars, faith and warfare are inseparable. To fight is to worship, and to worship is to fight. Every battle is a prayer offered in blood and fire, every enemy slain an offering laid before the golden throne. This fusion of martial excellence and religious fervor makes them extraordinarily effective warriors, but also deeply inflexible. The Black Templars do not compromise. They do not negotiate. They do not offer mercy to those they deem enemies of the God Emperor. Their view of the galaxy is binary. You are either faithful to the Emperor, or you are an enemy that must be destroyed. There is no middle ground, no grey area where diplomacy or pragmatism might apply. This absolutism has led them into conflicts with other imperial forces on occasion, particularly when they have deemed planetary governors, or even inquisitors, insufficiently devoted to the faith. But it has also made them one of the most reliable chapters in the Imperium's arsenal. When the Black Templars commit to a crusade, they see it through to completion, regardless of cost. They do not retreat from unfavorable battles, because retreat would mean abandoning the Emperor's work. They do not accept partial victories, because partial victory means enemies still draw breath. Their reputation for absolute commitment means that when the Black Templars arrive at a war zone, both allies and enemies know that the fighting will continue until one side is completely destroyed. The legacy of the longest crusade. For more than 10,000 years, the Black Templars have waged their eternal crusade. Our empires have risen and fallen in that time. Species have evolved and gone extinct. Stars have been born and died. But the Black Templars continue, generation after generation of warriors taking up the oath that Sigismund swore and carrying it forward into the darkness. They have participated in every major conflict of imperial history. During the War of the Beast, when massive green-skinned invaders threatened to destroy the Imperium entirely, Black Templars marshals led their crusades against the alien menace. During the Macarian Crusade, one of the greatest expansions of imperial territory in history, Black Templars fought alongside Lord Solar Macarius to conquer 1,000 worlds. During the Horus Heresy's immediate aftermath and the Age of Apostasy and the Time of Ending, through every crisis and every triumph, the Black Templars have been there, prosecuting their eternal war. Their influence extends beyond their direct military contributions. The Black Templars have become a symbol within the Imperium of absolute devotion and uncompromising faith. When Imperial Guard regiments fight alongside them, the soldiers are inspired by their presence, fighting with renewed fervor because they believe the God Emperor's chosen warriors stand among them. When planetary governors request aid from the Adeptus Astartes, they often hope for the Black Templars specifically, knowing that the chapter will not relent until every enemy has been destroyed. The chapter keeps scattered throughout Imperial space, serve as testament to their reach and influence. Unlike other chapters that concentrate their power around a homeworld, the Black Templars have established fortified positions on dozens or even hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. Each keep is staffed by a small garrison of Black Templars who maintain the facility, recruit from the local population, and serve as a ready response force for threats in that sector. When a crusade passes through the region, these keeps provide staging areas and resources, allowing the Black Templars to project power across vast distances. Some of these chapter keeps have stood for millennia, becoming institutions within their worlds. The population comes to view the Black Templars as guardians and protectors, and the chapter recruits heavily from these worlds, taking the strongest youths to become neophytes. Other keeps are more temporary, established after a crusade and then abandoned when the Black Templars move on to the next war. The inconsistency is intentional. The Black Templars do not want to become tied to any location. They maintain keeps for utility, not sentiment. Their exact numbers remain unknown outside the chapter itself. The Codex Astartes specifies that Space Marine chapters should contain no more than 1,000 battle brothers, with some variation for specialists and support personnel. The Black Templars almost certainly exceed this limit, perhaps by a substantial margin. Some estimates suggest they might maintain several thousand space marines across all their crusades. But the distributed nature of their forces makes accurate counting nearly impossible. Crusades operate independently for years at a time, and communication between them can be sporadic. No single authority, not even the High Marshal, has a complete and current accounting of every Black Templar in the field. The Inquisition has occasionally investigated this matter, concerned that an oversized chapter could pose a threat to imperial stability. But every investigation has reached the same conclusion. While the Black Templars almost certainly exceed the prescribed limit, they are too useful and too loyal to be constrained. Their crusading nature means they never concentrate their full strength in one place, and their absolute devotion to the Emperor makes them extremely unlikely to turn traitor. Pressing the issue would likely cause more problems than it would solve, so the Inquisition has learned to accept the Black Templars as they are. This pragmatic tolerance extends to other aspects of the chapter's non-compliance with imperial norms. They ignore the Codex Astartes organization. They refuse to employ librarians despite psychic support being standard across most chapters. They worship the Emperor as a god, when even most other Space Marines maintain a secular view. They challenge the authority of imperial officials when they believe those officials are insufficiently devoted to the faith. By most measures, the Black Templars should be viewed as problematic at best and potentially dangerous at worst. But they are also one of the most effective fighting forces in the entire Imperium. When worlds are threatened by alien invasion or heretical uprising, when crusades need to be launched into the darkest corners of the galaxy, or when the enemies of humanity need to be met with absolute fury and unshakable determination, the Black Templars deliver. They have fought in every major war of the last 10 millennia. They have destroyed threats that might have consumed entire sectors. They have demonstrated time and again that their faith is not a weakness, but a weapon, one that makes them more effective rather than less. The future of the Eternal Crusade. As the Imperium faces the dangers of the current age, with the Great Rift splitting the galaxy and chaos forces threatening to overwhelm humanity's defenses, the Black Templars continue their eternal crusade with undiminished fervor. If anything, the current crisis has validated their worldview. While other chapters are scrambling to adapt to the new reality, they are trying to understand how the galaxy has changed and what strategies might work in this darker age, the Black Templars simply continue doing what they have always done, finding enemies and destroying them. High Marshal Helbrecht leads the chapter from the Eternal Crusader, coordinating crusades across both sides of the Great Rift. His oath to hunt Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka remains unfulfilled, and he dedicates substantial resources to that pursuit, even while managing the chapter's broader obligations. Some question whether his focus on this personal vendetta serves the Imperium's best interests, but Helbrecht is unyielding. He made an oath before the Emperor, and he will fulfill it regardless of what others think. The integration of Primaris Marines continues, or with more Black Templars crossing the Rubicon Primaris and new recruits being elevated directly to Primaris specifications. These enhanced warriors bring increased combat effectiveness, allowing crusades to take on even more dangerous missions. The chapter's size has likely grown as a result, with the new Primaris reinforcements adding to, rather than replacing, the existing forces. This expansion would concern the Inquisition if they could track it accurately, but as always, the distributed nature of the Black Templars makes exact accounting impossible. New marshals have been elevated to command crusades composed primarily of Primaris Marines. These crusades are pushing into regions previously considered too dangerous or too distant, extending the chapter's reach even further. As some of these crusades have lost contact with the rest of the chapter, trapped beyond the Great Rift in the region known as Imperium Nihilus, where the Astronomican's light does not reach. But the Black Templars are accustomed to operating independently. These isolated crusades will continue fighting until they achieve victory, or until the last warrior falls. Communication with the rest of the chapter is preferred, but not necessary. The oath demands only that they continue fighting, and that they can do regardless of external support. The Black Templars have also been working to re-establish contact with crusades that went dark during the Noctis Aeterna. Some have been found, their warriors having continued their missions despite years of isolation. Others remain missing, their fates unknown. Oh, the chapter mourns these lost brothers, but does not allow that grief to slow their momentum. For every crusade that has been lost, new ones are being launched. The oath must be maintained. The crusade must continue. Perhaps most significantly, the Black Templars have emerged as one of the most prominent chapters in the Indomitus Crusade, Guilliman's massive campaign to reconquer lost territories and shore up the Imperium's defenses. Their crusading nature makes them ideally suited for this kind of offensive warfare, and their willingness to operate independently for extended periods means they can be deployed to the most challenging theatres without requiring extensive logistical support. Guilliman has a complicated relationship with the Black Templars. He respects their effectiveness and cannot question their loyalty, but their rejection of his Codex Astartes and their religious extremism trouble him. He fought alongside the Emperor during the Great Crusade, and he knows that the Emperor did not want to be worshipped as a god. Seeing Space Marines, warriors who should be the epitome of the Emperor's rationalist vision, embracing religious fervor so completely is disturbing to him. But he is also pragmatic enough to recognize that the Imperium needs the Black Templars exactly as they are. Any attempt to reform them would likely trigger conflict, and the Imperium cannot afford to lose such effective warriors over ideological differences. So the relationship continues, characterized by mutual respect and mutual wariness. The Black Templars answer Guilliman's calls when it suits their purposes. They contribute to the Indomitus Crusade when their own crusades align with its objectives, and largely ignore the Primarch when they have other priorities. Guilliman accepts this because he must, though one suspects he wishes they were more amenable to coordination and less likely to pursue their own crusades without consulting higher authority. For their part, the Black Templars view Guilliman with reverence as one of the Emperor's sons, but also with some skepticism regarding his vision for the Imperium. They serve the God Emperor, not his servants, no matter how exalted those servants might be. If Guilliman's commands align with their eternal crusade, they will follow them enthusiastically. If those commands seem to contradict their oath or their faith, they will politely but firmly chart their own course. A Primarch may have authority over many things, but the oath sworn by Sigismund supersedes all mortal chains of command. No pity, no remorse, no fear. The battle cry of the Black Templars encapsulates everything they are. No pity, no remorse, no fear. It is shouted before assaults, roared during combat, whispered as a warrior's dying breath. These are not merely words, but a statement of absolute conviction, a rejection of everything that might make them hesitate or compromise. No pity for the enemies of the Emperor, because mercy shown to heretics and aliens is mercy wasted. The enemies of humanity deserve nothing but death, delivered swiftly and without hesitation. To pity them would be to suggest that they might have value, that their existence might be justified, and such thoughts are anathema to the Black Templars. The galaxy is at war, and in war there are only the faithful and the damned. No remorse for actions taken in the Emperor's name, because righteous deeds require no apology. If worlds burn in the prosecution of the crusade, if populations are sacrificed to achieve victory, if difficult choices must be made, the Black Templars make them without regret. They serve a higher purpose, and that purpose justifies any cost. To feel remorse would be to question whether their actions were justified, and such questioning has no place in the hearts of crusaders. No fear of death or defeat, because faith protects, and the God Emperor watches over his faithful servants. A Black Templar goes into battle certain of two things: that he fights for the most righteous cause imaginable, and that whether he lives or dies, he will have served the Emperor. And death holds no terror for warriors who believe that service to the God Emperor continues beyond the mortal realm. Fear is for those who lack faith, who worry about their own survival above their duty. The Black Templars have no such concerns. This philosophy makes them nearly impossible to intimidate or demoralize. Psychological warfare tactics that might break other forces have no effect on the Black Templars. Threats mean nothing to warriors who do not fear death. Offers of mercy or negotiation are rejected without consideration because the Black Templars extend neither. They are an implacable force, driven by absolute conviction and immune to doubt. It also makes them dangerous allies. When fighting alongside Black Templars, one must be prepared for their uncompromising approach. They will not slow down to accommodate weaker forces. When they will not accept strategic retreats if they believe victory is still achievable. They will not show mercy to defeated enemies or accept surrenders if they judge those enemies deserving of death. Imperial Guard regiments and other Space Marine chapters must adapt to the Black Templars' methods or risk being left behind as the Crusaders charge forward into the most dangerous positions. But for those who can match their intensity and share their conviction, fighting alongside the Black Templars is an extraordinary experience. Their faith is contagious in the best possible way, inspiring those around them to deeds of heroism they might never have attempted otherwise. When the Black Templars assault an enemy position, other Imperial forces find themselves caught up in the momentum, charging alongside these black-armored giants, because to do otherwise would be unthinkable. The Black Templars make those around them better warriors, not through instruction but through example. The chapter's impact on Imperial culture extends beyond the battlefield. Stories about the Black Templars circulate throughout human-controlled space. Tales of warriors who never rest and never falter, who bring the Emperor's judgment to the darkest corners of the galaxy. These stories inspire faith among the population, reinforce the teachings of the Imperial cult, and provide hope in a galaxy where hope is a rare commodity. Children on countless worlds grow up hearing about the Black Templars, dreaming of the day when they might join a crusade and serve the God Emperor with the same devotion. Some of these children will indeed become Black Templars. The chapter recruits from hundreds of worlds across the galaxy, taking the strongest and most faithful youths and transforming them into Space Marines. The process is brutal, with most aspirants dying during the implantation of gene seed or the early stages of training. But those who survive emerge as neophytes, ready to join Crusader squads and begin learning what it truly means to be a Black Templar. That education never truly ends. Even initiates who have served for decades continue to learn and grow, refining their skills and deepening their faith. The chapter does not have formal progression through ranks like other chapters might. A Black Templar remains an initiate until he is selected for the Sword Brethren or chosen for a specialized role like chaplain or apothecary. This flat structure reinforces the sense that all Black Templars are equal in the eyes of the God Emperor, differentiated only by their specific duties rather than formal hierarchy. Veteran Black Templars, those who have served for centuries and fought in countless battles, develop a perspective unique to their chapter. They have witnessed the cyclical nature of war in the galaxy, have seen how enemies are defeated only to be replaced by new threats. Where this might breed cynicism in warriors of other chapters, it instead reinforces the Black Templars' conviction that their crusade must indeed be eternal. The war will never end because the enemies of humanity will never stop threatening the Imperium. The only appropriate response is eternal vigilance and eternal warfare. These veterans serve as living examples of what the crusade demands and what it offers. They have given everything to the oath, have sacrificed their entire lives to prosecuting the Emperor's enemies. In return, they have achieved something that few warriors can claim: absolute certainty of purpose. They know why they exist and what they must do. There is no doubt, no questioning, no wondering whether their sacrifices have meaning. The crusade is the meaning, and they are its instruments. The unending war. As this exploration of the Black Templars draws to a close, it is worth reflecting on what they represent within the broader context of Warhammer 40,000. They are, In many ways, the Imperium's crusading ideal, taken to its logical extreme, they embody the absolutism that the imperial cult preaches, the unwavering devotion that the ecclesiarchy demands, the eternal warfare that the Astra Militarum prosecutes across 10,000 worlds. But they are also a cautionary tale about the costs of such devotion. The Black Templars have given up everything that might resemble a normal existence, even by Space Marine standards. They do not know peace, do not build civilizations, do not create anything except the ashes of their enemies. They are perpetual motion, warriors who exist only to fight and who define themselves entirely through combat. This makes them extraordinarily effective, but also fundamentally incomplete as beings. A Black Templar knows nothing but war. From the moment he is recruited as a youth, through his transformation into a Space Marine, across centuries of service, and finally to his death in battle, his entire existence is dedicated to violence. He never experiences the satisfaction of building something lasting. He never knows the peace of accomplishment or the comfort of home. He measures his worth entirely by how many enemies he has slain and how faithfully he has prosecuted the crusade. Is this a tragedy or a triumph? The Black Templars themselves would say it is neither. It simply is. They do not view their existence as sacrificial or tragic because they have never known any other life and do not desire one. The crusade is everything, and they are content with that. They do not question their purpose because their faith provides absolute answers to all questions. They do not mourn what they have given up because they never valued it in the first place. To outside observers, what this might seem like a limited or even pitiable existence, but it is also one of complete fulfillment according to the Black Templars' own values. They have given themselves entirely to a cause they believe in absolutely, and they pursue that cause without reservation or compromise. In a galaxy characterized by moral ambiguity and pragmatic compromise, the Black Templars stand as figures of absolute conviction. They know their purpose, and they fulfill it without hesitation. The Eternal Crusade continues. Right now, at this very moment, Black Templars' crusades are fighting battles across the galaxy. They are boarding alien ships and purging them with bolt and blade. They are assaulting heretic strongholds and bringing the Emperor's judgment to those who have strayed from his light. Yet they are defending imperial worlds from invasion and ensuring that humanity's domains remain secure. They do this not because they were ordered to, or because they calculate that these actions serve their interests, but because their oath demands it and their faith compels it. New recruits are being inducted into the chapter even as veterans fall in battle. The cycle continues, generation after generation, with each new Black Templar taking up the burden that Sigismund first shouldered 10,000 years ago. The oath is passed down like a sacred heirloom, each warrior adding his own deeds to the long history of the chapter while maintaining the fundamental mission that has never changed. How much longer will the crusade last? The Black Templars would say it will last forever, or until the last enemy of humanity is destroyed, whichever comes first. Since they believe the enemies of humanity are infinite and eternal, the crusade will likewise continue without end. This is not pessimism, but simple recognition of reality as they see it. The galaxy is darkness, and the Emperor's light must continually push it back. The moment that light falters, the darkness rushes in. So the Black Templars endure, carrying their oath forward through the ages. They are not the largest chapter, though their numbers exceed standard limits. They are not the most technically proficient, as they reject much of what the Codex Astartes teaches. They do not wield the most advanced equipment or employ the most sophisticated tactics. What they have, what sets them apart from every other chapter in the Imperium, is absolute, unshakable conviction. They believe in their cause with every fiber of their enhanced biology and every fragment of their transhuman consciousness. That conviction makes them one of the most effective fighting forces the Imperium has ever fielded. When the Black Templars arrive at a war zone, the outcome is rarely in doubt. They will fight until victory or death, with no middle ground, no negotiation, no compromise. They are the Emperor's wrath made manifest, his judgment delivered by warriors who know no pity, no remorse, and no fear. In eternal service, the navigation systems aboard these fleet vessels are blessed by navigators who understand the sacred nature of their work. When a Black Templar's ship enters the warp, it does so with prayers on the lips of every soul aboard. The warp is the realm of chaos, and traveling through it is inherently dangerous. But the Black Templars trust in the Emperor's protection and the faith of their warriors to see them safely through. That they have maintained their crusading for 10,000 years across countless warp jumps speaks to either the effectiveness of their faith or simple statistical survival, depending on one's perspective. The ships also serve as museums of sorts, containing artifacts and relics from the chapter's long history. Weapons wielded by famous warriors, armor worn during legendary battles, banners carried through centuries of crusades, all are preserved and displayed throughout the fleet. These artifacts serve both as inspiration for current warriors and as physical connections to the chapter's past. A young initiate can stand before the armor worn by a legendary sword brother and understand that he is part of a tradition stretching back millennia. The weapons of faith, land raiders, and close combat mastery. The Black Templars are known for their preference for close combat, but this preference would be meaningless without the means to deliver their warriors into melee range. In the grim darkness of the far future, where battles are often decided by firepower from extreme range, closing the distance to an enemy requires both courage and the right equipment. The Black Templars possess both in abundance, and nowhere is this more evident than in their innovative use of the Land Raider assault transport. The standard Land Raider is already one of the most formidable armored vehicles in the Imperium's arsenal. It combines heavy armor capable of shrugging off most weapons, powerful armament that can destroy enemy tanks and fortifications, and the ability to transport a full squad of Space Marines in armored security. For most chapters, this is sufficient. But for the Black Templars, the standard Land Raider design had limitations. Its Lascannons, while excellent for destroying vehicles, were less effective against massed infantry. Its transport capacity, while adequate for standard tactical squads, was insufficient for the larger Crusader squads that the Black Templars preferred to field. During the Vinculus Crusade, these limitations became acute problems. The Black Templars had been dispatched to crush a rebellion on the world of Gerulus, where heretics had seized control of several massive hive cities. Or the rebels had fortified these cities extensively, turning them into labyrinths of defensive positions that could shred any force attempting to assault them through open ground. Traditional siege tactics were failing, and casualties were mounting. High Marshal Ludoldos, who commanded the crusade, recognized that without a breakthrough, the campaign could drag on for years and consume warriors the chapter could not easily replace. It was Brother Artificer Symagus who developed the solution. Working in the Crusade's mobile forges aboard their fleet, he designed a Land Raider variant specifically optimized for breaching fortifications and delivering assault troops directly into close combat. He replaced the twin Lascannons with hurricane pattern bolter arrays, sacrificing anti-tank capability for the ability to shred infantry at close range. While he expanded the troop compartment, allowing it to carry larger squads that could exploit any breach more effectively, and he reinforced the frontal armor even further, ensuring the vehicle could survive the concentrated fire it would inevitably face during an assault. The result was the Land Raider Crusader, and it revolutionized the Black Templars' approach to urban warfare. These new vehicles could charge through defensive positions, their hurricane bolters clearing infantry from firing positions, while their thick armor absorbed return fire. When they reached the enemy fortifications, they would deploy their squads directly into the breach, allowing the Black Templars to transition seamlessly from the armored advance to close combat. And the Crusader pattern proved so effective during the Vinculus Crusade that it became standard throughout the chapter, and eventually its design spread to other chapters who recognized its utility. The Land Raider Crusader is more than just a vehicle to the Black Templars. It is a symbol of their tactical philosophy made manifest. Where other chapters might methodically reduce enemy positions with long-range firepower, the Black Templars prefer to simply smash through them and resolve the issue in melee. Where others might accept slow, grinding advances, the Black Templars demand speed and shock. The Crusader allows them to fight the way they prefer, delivering them to close quarters where faith and fury matter more than tactical sophistication. But the Land Raider Crusader is only one element of the Black Templars' arsenal. Their warriors are equipped with the finest weapons the chapter's artificers can produce. Chainswords, those iconic close combat weapons that have become synonymous with Space Marine warfare, are maintained with religious devotion. Each chainsword is blessed before use, its motor consecrated, its teeth anointed with holy oils. When a Black Templar revs his chainsword before charging into combat, it is both a practical act of preparation and a religious ritual. Power weapons, which use energy fields to slice through armor that would turn aside conventional blades, are reserved for those who have proven themselves in battle. Initiates who demonstrate exceptional skill, or who have performed particularly valorous deeds, might be granted power swords or power axes. The Sword Brethren, the chapter's elite, almost invariably carry power weapons into battle, wielding them with skill honed across decades or centuries of warfare. The tradition of chaining weapons to gauntlets, inherited from Sigismund's friendship with Khan before the heresy, remains universal within the chapter. These chains ensure that even if a warrior is disarmed or knocked unconscious, his weapons remain with him. They also carry profound symbolic weight. A Black Templar who has chained his weapons to his arms has committed himself absolutely to the battle. He cannot easily release those weapons, cannot easily surrender them to an enemy. He will fight with them until victory or death, and the chains serve as a constant physical reminder of that commitment. The Black Templars also make extensive use of flamers and melter weapons for breaching operations. And when assaulting fortified positions or clearing dense urban terrain, these weapons are invaluable. Flamers can clear rooms and corridors of enemies in seconds, their promethium fuel turning cover into death traps. Melter weapons can cut through the thickest armor plating, allowing assault teams to bypass defenses that would stall other attackers. The Black Templars value both for their effectiveness at close range, where most of their combat occurs. Notable warriors and their deeds. While Sigismund and Grimaldus are the most famous names in Black Templars history, the chapter has produced countless heroes across its 10,000 years of existence. Each crusade has its own legends, warriors whose deeds have become the stuff of chapter lore. To understand the Black Templars fully, one must appreciate not just their doctrine and organization, but the individual warriors who have embodied that doctrine through their actions. High Marshal Ludoldus, who commanded the chapter during the Vinculus Crusade, and who later fell defending Hellsreach's Temple of the Emperor Ascendant alongside his sword brethren, exemplified the Black Templars' commitment to holding sacred ground at any cost. When the temple came under assault from overwhelming enemy forces, Ludoldus and his veterans breached and held the walls, allowing allied forces to fight their way inside. His sacrifice bought the time needed for victory, and his name is spoken with reverence in the chapter's histories. Marshal Austin, who led the Daunian Crusade against massive greenskin forces in the Segmentum Pacificus, demonstrated the Black Templars' willingness to accept any sacrifice in pursuit of victory. The Daunian Crusade lasted for 17 years of continuous combat, with Austin driving his forces forward relentlessly despite mounting casualties. When he fell on the world of Nickel 5, killed by Xenos warriors that had overwhelmed his position, his successor, Marshal Werner, continued the crusade until total victory was achieved. The Daunian Crusade stands as testament to the Black Templars' refusal to accept anything less than complete triumph. Emperor's champion Ansgar serves as a cautionary tale and an inspiration simultaneously. During recent fighting on Armageddon, Ansgar was captured by greenskin forces led by the warlord Grimskar. Rather than simply killing him, the Xenos somehow resurrected him as a grotesque cyborg hybrid, using stolen Black Templars technology to create a mockery of what Ansgar had been. The chapter was horrified by this desecration, and Dreadnought Gerald, formed a strike force specifically to hunt down Grimskar and recover both Ansgar's body and the sacred black sword and armor of faith he had carried. The hunt continues, a reminder that the Black Templars never forget their fallen brothers and will pursue vengeance across entire worlds if necessary. Castellan Raymer led a crusade into the Veiled region, an unexplored area of space where his forces inadvertently encountered the fallen angels, renegades from the Dark Angels chapter. The Black Templars captured one of these fallen, and when the Dark Angels arrived demanding his immediate transfer to their custody, Raymer refused. The standoff nearly led to open warfare between two loyalist chapters, highlighting how the Black Templars' independent nature can sometimes bring them into conflict, even with their allies. The situation was eventually resolved through negotiations, but it demonstrated that the Black Templars answer to no authority except the Emperor himself, regardless of the complications this might cause. These are just a few names from thousands. Every crusade has its heroes, its champions, its warriors who performed deeds worthy of remembrance. The chapter's histories contain entire volumes dedicated to recounting their exploits, and chaplains regularly reference these stories in their sermons. These tales serve multiple purposes. They inspire current warriors by showing what can be achieved through faith and determination, as they preserve the chapter's institutional memory, ensuring that hard-won lessons are not forgotten across generations, and they reinforce the Black Templars' identity as inheritors of a tradition stretching back to Sigismund himself. Recruitment and training, forging warriors of faith. The Black Templars' recruitment practices reflect their crusading nature and their distributed organization. Unlike chapters with a single homeworld from which they draw all their aspirants, the Black Templars recruit from hundreds of worlds across the galaxy wherever their chapter keeps have been established. This gives them access to a vast pool of potential recruits, allowing them to maintain their numbers despite the chapter's aggressive combat doctrine and high casualty rates. Each chapter keep maintains a recruitment program suited to the local population. On feral worlds where primitive humans struggle for survival, the keep's garrison might conduct regular trials to identify the strongest youths. On hive worlds where billions live in cramped conditions, they might recruit from the underhives where only the most ruthless survive. On civilized worlds, they might select candidates from among the PDF forces or noble houses. The specific methods vary, but the goal is always the same: to identify young humans who possess the physical potential and mental fortitude to become Space Marines. The standards are extraordinarily high. Only 1 in thousands of humans has the genetic compatibility necessary to accept Space Marine implants. Of those, only a fraction possess the psychological resilience to survive the transformation process and the brutal training that accompanies it. And even among those who meet these baseline requirements, the Black Templars select only those who demonstrate the zealous faith that defines their chapter. A candidate might be physically perfect and mentally strong, but if he lacks the absolute conviction in the God Emperor that the Black Templars demand, he will be rejected. Those who are selected face a transformation that is both physical and spiritual. The implantation of gene seed is a lengthy process involving 19 separate organs that must be implanted and integrated into the aspirant's body over a period of years. Each organ brings new capabilities. The second heart that allows a Space Marine to survive when one heart is damaged. The osses modular that strengthens bones to the point where they can support power armor. The biscopea that rapidly grows muscle tissue. The implants that allow Space Marines to spit acid, go without sleep for extended periods, and interface directly with their armor's systems. This process is dangerous at every stage. Many aspirants die during implantation when their bodies reject the foreign organs. Others survive the physical transformation, but suffer mental breaks under the psychological pressure of becoming something more than human. The Black Templars lose more than half of their recruits during this process, but they view this as acceptable. Those who survive are proven to be worthy, and those who fall have died in service to the Emperor, which is an honorable fate in itself. But physical transformation is only the beginning. as the aspirants must also be indoctrinated into the chapter's culture and beliefs. This is where the Black Templars training differs most dramatically from other chapters, where the Ultramarines might focus on teaching the principles of the Codex Astartes, and the Raven Guard might emphasize stealth and infiltration tactics. The Black Templars focus above all on faith. Every lesson is framed in religious terms. Every drill is accompanied by prayers. Every moment of training reinforces the idea that they are holy warriors serving the God Emperor in his eternal war against the darkness. The neophytes, as these recruits are called, once they have survived initial implantation and training, are immediately integrated into active Crusader squads, rather than being kept separate in scout companies like most chapters do. Whereas this means neophytes go into actual combat far earlier in their development than would be normal in a Codex-compliant chapter. They fight alongside initiates, learning through direct experience rather than theoretical instruction. The system is harsh, and many neophytes die in their first battles. But the Black Templars believe this is the best way to forge warriors of appropriate quality. Each neophyte is assigned to an initiate who serves as his mentor and teacher. This creates a personal bond that often lasts for the rest of their lives. The initiate is responsible for teaching the neophyte everything he needs to know about combat, about the chapter's traditions, about what it means to be a Black Templar. In return, the neophyte provides an extra pair of hands in battle and learns to trust his mentor absolutely. These pairs often fight together for decades, with the neophyte eventually becoming an initiate himself and taking on his own student. The training emphasizes close combat above all else. While neophytes are taught to use all standard Space Marine weapons, the focus is on melee warfare, where the Black Templars excel. They drill endlessly with chainswords and combat blades, learning forms and techniques that have been refined over 10 millennia of warfare. They practice charging under fire, learning to ignore incoming rounds, and focus solely on reaching the enemy. They study the weak points in various types of armor, learning where to strike for maximum effect. But perhaps most importantly, they learn faith. The chaplains take personal interest in every neophyte, testing their conviction and strengthening their belief through sermons and private instruction. A neophyte must be able to recite dozens of prayers and litanies from memory. He must understand the chapter's history and be able to explain why the Black Templars fight as they do. He must demonstrate absolute faith in the God Emperor and unwavering commitment to the eternal crusade. Those who complete this training and are elevated to the rank of initiate become full battle brothers of the chapter. They are granted power armor bearing the black and white colors of the Black Templars and are authorized to bear the chapter's heraldry. This is a moment of tremendous pride and significance, a transition from aspirant to warrior. But it is not an ending. A Black Templar's education continues throughout his life as he gains experience in battle. He learns from his brothers and deepens his understanding of what it means to serve the God Emperor. The weight of 10 millennia. 10,000 years is an almost incomprehensible span of time for mortals. Civilizations rise and fall. Technologies are discovered and lost. Species evolve or go extinct. But the Black Templars endure, maintaining their crusade across this vast span with a consistency that borders on the inhuman. What does it mean to be part of an organization that has existed for 10,000 years? What weight does that history carry? For the Black Templars, their history is not merely a record of past events, but a living presence that shapes every decision and action. When a chaplain delivers a sermon before battle, he references not just recent campaigns, but battles fought millennia ago. When a marshal plans a crusade, and he considers not just current strategic necessities, but how his choices will be judged by warriors who will live centuries after his death. The chapter exists in a continuum of time that connects Sigismund's oath directly to the present day, with every warrior serving as a link in that unbroken chain. This creates a culture deeply rooted in tradition, yet simultaneously focused on the present moment. Black Templars honor their past and maintain rituals that date back to their founding, but they do not live in the past. Each battle is approached with fresh intensity, each enemy faced with immediate fury. The weight of history is a source of strength rather than burden, a reminder that they are part of something far greater than themselves. The chapter's collective memory is preserved through multiple means. Yes, the chaplains serve as living repositories of lore, memorizing vast amounts of history and passing it on to new generations through their sermons and teachings. The chapter keeps contain archives where significant events are recorded, though the distributed nature of these archives means no single location contains the complete history. And most importantly, the oral tradition remains strong. Warriors tell stories to one another, recount the deeds of heroes both ancient and recent, and ensure that the chapter's legends remain alive in the minds of those who fight. But maintaining coherent traditions across 10,000 years of continuous warfare presents challenges. The chapter has changed over the millennia, despite their resistance to change. Warriors who knew Sigismund personally are all long dead. Thus, the Imperium they defend is vastly different from the one Sigismund fought for. Technologies have been lost and rediscovered. Enemies have evolved and adapted. The Black Templars have had to change with the times while somehow remaining true to their founding principles. This tension between tradition and adaptation is managed through the concept of core principles versus flexible implementation. The core principles, the oath of eternal crusading, the worship of the god emperor, the preference for close combat, the rejection of psychers, these never change. They are non-negotiable aspects of the chapter's identity. But how those principles are applied in practice can vary depending on circumstances. New weapons are adopted when they prove effective. New tactics are developed to counter new enemies. The chapter evolves while maintaining its fundamental character. If you found this exploration of the Black Templars enlightening, I encourage you to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep explorations into the lore of Warhammer 40,000. The galaxy is vast, and there are countless stories to tell about the factions that fight for survival in the darkness between stars. The Black Templars stand as one of the Imperium's most fascinating and complex organizations. Warriors who have maintained their identity and purpose across 10,000 years of unimaginable change. Their story is one of absolute devotion, of faith pushed to its furthest extreme, of an oath that can never be fulfilled and must never be abandoned. They are crusaders in the truest sense, holy warriors who will fight until the last enemy falls, or until they themselves are destroyed, in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war and the laughter of thirsting gods. The Black Templars wage their eternal crusade. They do not ask for thanks or recognition. They do not expect to see the end of their mission within their lifetimes or within 1,000 lifetimes. They simply fight, as they have always fought, as Sigismund fought when he swore his oath, as their descendants will fight long after we are dust and memory. The crusade continues. It always has. It always will. And the Black Templars will be there, in their black armor marked with purity seals and holy inscriptions, bearing their blessed weapons and chanting their litanies of hate, bringing the Emperor's judgment to the darkest corners of the galaxy. No pity for the enemies of the Emperor, no remorse for the actions taken in his name, no fear of death or defeat. For the Emperor and for Sigismund, the eternal crusade endures. Thank you for watching, and may the Emperor protect you.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.